Hello everyone. So, while I was browsing the behemoth of a gaming library that I have, looking for a decent horror game to play, a certain extraterrestrial one caught my eye, Alien Isolation. I've already watched the original 1979 movie, and I even played the game before, albeit didn't reach very far because of reasons we'll get to soon, but this time I went in with the goal of finally finishing it, no matter how difficult or terrifying it was at times. This is the video born from that experience, a comprehensive iceberg covering its story, hidden details, and darkest secrets. So, without further ado, let's explore the ruins of Sevastopol Station and uncover the many horrors that lurk within. Sevastopol. In Alien Isolation, you play as Amanda Ripley, daughter of Ellen Ripley from the Alien movies. Ellen has been missing for 15 years, and her daughter, having been seeking closure ever since, became an engineer and took up work in the region where she went missing. In the game, she's given an opportunity to retrieve the flight recorder unit of the Nostromo that may finally provide some insight on the fate of her mother. She needs to make the journey to Sevastopol Station, and this is where the majority of the game is set. After entering the station with less than conventional means, you can soon get a sense of its sorry state. Gas leaks and fires blocking pathways, precarious platforms haphazardly placed over bare pipes, and those same pipes leaking constantly, along with graffiti plastered everywhere. The fact of the matter is that Sevastopol is being decommissioned, and the station has long since been in disarray. You first find out about this from this log. It reads, "So, boys and girls, you've probably heard the whispers about Sevastopol by now, and I can confirm it's official. Sevastopol is being decommissioned. I'll go over with each of you what this means in regards to your contracts and next placement, but for now we still have a job to do. The suits want this done with a skeleton crew, which means we'll only be getting a few outside contractors to help, but it does mean overtime. I recommend taking what you can while it's available. I should point out that the decommission does not mean lucky dip. Everything here has to be accounted for, and I will personally escort anyone found helping themselves to equipment to Marshal Waits, Chief." But how did it all come to this? Well, there are more logs like this throughout the game, and through them we learn the station's history, which is just fraught with complications from the very start. Seegson was built as a free port. Construction lasted between 2095 to 2105, and after it was completed, it was already facing hardships. According to the log Tomorrow Together, number 3, it was affected by years of mismanagement and the rerouting of the Sol Thetis flight path, which decreased trade volume, and quote, left Sevastopol in real danger of being decommissioned. Seegson, however, swooped in and saved the day, revitalizing the station and pulling it from the brink of disrepair. This didn't last forever though, and the station eventually turned into a backwater. Seegson's strategy stumbled. It mainly consisted of producing low-cost alternatives to Weyland-Yutani goods, the cheaply manufactured androids dubbed Working Joes being a substitute for realistic synthetics and the other technologies they attempted to sell, still sitting in some corner forever awaiting use. It's a case of a second-tier company trying to compete with the big monopoly and failing to keep up, while Seegson seeks stations similar to Sevastopol to invest in and turn a profit from. Companies like Weyland-Yutani focused on the growing efforts of colonization and terraforming. It was a gamble, and they lost dearly. Seegson is a mega corporation, and as mega corporations go, it's just as shady and uncaring as the rest of them. Throughout the game, you'll notice the environment dripping with classic corporate insincerity. It's everywhere, in the posters, big smiles, catchy slogans, and the messages sent after taking away the jobs of hundreds, as shown here. Seegson regrets to inform that Gemini Exoplan Solutions will receive no further funding. Seegson is not liable for time remaining on Gemini personnel contracts. Please talk to your line manager about the facility shutdown and what it will mean for you. We would like to take this opportunity to personally thank you for the time you spent with us. That last line is such a jarring juxtaposition that you can't help but wonder whether they mean it or not. It's cold and quietly mutters that you are all expendable. Furthermore, we also have examples of possible corporate malpractice, albeit only hinted at in the game. There are 2 medical records alluding to this. The first one details a patient with an anxiety disorder, a fractured tibia, and suspected internal bruising. This could be because of abuse or poor working conditions, I'm not particularly sure, but these records are all before the androids went rogue and the alien appeared on station, so that can't be the cause. I say this because Medical Record 3 has, quote, several chemical burns to arms and legs. At first I thought this was just a reference to the acid blood that the alien has, and this patient somehow came in contact with it, but that can't be the case. So it's probably from working in an unsafe environment, possibly the hazardous chemical labs in Project KG-348. You could claim that these are a result of the patient's own carelessness, but then again that sounds like something a lawyer would say, so who knows. Another thing that gives insight into Seegson as a company are, of course, the working Joes. Seegson brands them as an alternative to the regular human-looking synthetics, and cites their appearance as a way for you to always know who's a human and who's not, summed up neatly in this tagline.
You always know a working Joe. Each working Joe synthetic at Seegson is subjected to thousands of safety checks before activation. That's because we understand we're building machines, not people. Seegson. Tomorrow, together.
I believed this when I was playing, thinking it's a reasonable selling point, and I chalked up the terrifying appearance to just awful execution. What is actually the case though is that it's just a clever marketing method they use to explain away their shoddy androids. I got this from this fantastic interview with the writers for the game, Will Porter and Dion Lay. They describe exactly what type of corporation Seegson is, and that ultimately, it's just the overlords looking out for their bottom line, while everyone else might as well not exist. Porter says, quote, "To me this is the voice of Seegson, an ineffectual boardroom forever leaking talent to the likes of Wayland Yutani, sending out nothing but self-deluding missives that have little to no use on Earth, let alone for the real people suffering on a dilapidated space station floating alone on the edge of space. I wanted to make them the masters of corporate doublethink, stressing the everything's okay, we value you propaganda, while the executives themselves look for their next plum job and siphon off what remains of the company gravy train. Space stations like Sevastopol are Seegson's white elephant, and even though everyone who works for them knows they're doomed, the enforced company message that everything is fine has been drummed home and disbelieved until the inevitable has taken place. Ultimately, it's the little guys, the real working Joes, caught in the downfall." The writers then go on to explain how they finalized the look and feel of the androids. Personally, when I first started playing the game and had no idea what I was doing, I was more afraid of these lifeless mannequins than the alien itself. Something about their calm yet aggressive demeanor, that flapping bundle of skin they call a neck, the bright LED pinholes for eyes, it's phenomenal design gameplay-wise. You can't help but be unsettled whenever you interact with one, especially when it's chasing you and uttering in a monotone voice with a posh British accent.
Why not ask me about Sevastopol safety protocols?
Add to this the ones on the ground that grab your leg if you're not careful enough. I fell for this exact same one 3 damn times, and you have a horrifying enemy. Finally, some odd bits and ends regarding Seegson and Sevastopol. First, Sevastopol is named after the much more successful real-life Sevastopol, the largest city in Crimea, which is also a port that was placed in a strategic location. If we look at Sevastopol, we can notice it bears a stark resemblance to the refinery that the Nostromo is hauling in Alien. One feature that stuck out to me is these spheres underneath it that make it look like the station is about to lay eggs. Symbolism for the actual eggs that hatch in it after the incident. Speaking of symbolism, this game is chock full of it. For example, there is a log that has a message that was sent when Sevastopol first became operational, and it's written by Hope A. A hope? A hope that this station wouldn't fail and would be a hustling bustling hub? Moreover, the name Seegson was originally Sieg and Son, and while earlier drafts of the story have Sieg spelled as Sig with double G, the former means victory in German. Similar to A Hope, I'd like to think that these little inserts are cruel jokes by the devs, given the eventual fate of the station. Well, that was quite a long entry, but I promise the following ones won't be as lengthy. The AI of AI. There are a lot of videos on this topic already, since it's such a cornerstone of the game, but basically the AI of Alien Isolation is very sophisticated, especially that of the Xenomorph. The developers of the game came from the Total War saga, which from what I've heard requires really robust AI for the game to function properly, so I think this is what aided them in creating such a believable alien. Whenever it's stalking you and whenever you just observe it from a hidden corner, you can feel that it's actively making decisions to find its prey, doubling back, faking the player out. Checking under desks and tables, and getting close and personal if you're in a locker. I could go on and on. But the bulk of it is that there are two AIs, so to speak, the Director AI and the AI of the Xenomorph itself. The former knows the location of the player at all times, and as its name implies, gives hints to the alien regarding your location. It never outright tells the alien where the player is, but gives an area for it to hunt in. As the search progresses, and this is depending on the difficulty, it zones in on the player's exact location, so you're encouraged to never stay in one spot for too long. This is where the second AI comes in, that of the Xenomorph. It gets these omniscient directions and uses them to locate the player. However, it doesn't rely on them directly, and must actively search for its prey to find it. There's also a behavior tree for the alien that gets slowly unlocked throughout each session, as in when you die it gets restarted, and another one that unlocks throughout the entire game. So the alien will start to develop resistance to things like the flamethrower, not retreating as fast or enduring the pain and attacking you regardless. It also starts ignoring noisemakers and flares faster if you throw them too much, and so on and so forth. It learns from your actions and forces you to adapt accordingly. Julia Jones. Julia Jones is one of the many side characters in Sevastopol who, although we know a lot about through the archive logs and audio tapes, we never really get to see. She was a reporter who came aboard the station and lived on it for 2 months, writing and documenting her findings in the Announced Post of Progress articles, which provided a lot of insight as to what really happened on Sevastopol. What really strikes me with her whole story, however, is the tragic end that she faced. I'll let one of her audio recordings play.
I don't know when anyone will get this, but someone needs to keep a record, and I don't know. I came here a few months ago to write about the collapse of a dream, a future gone sour. For me, the people here were little more than footnotes for my article. Something to tug at the heartstrings. And when the disappearances started, oh, I was thrilled. This was something big. But now people are afraid, and a communication fault means we're alone. I'm trapped here, just like everybody else. Another footnote. Another victim.
I felt really bad for Julia Jones. Despite her dismissing the disappearances and having the complete opposite emotional reaction you're supposed to when you hear people are disappearing, it shows that sometimes we're just completely insensitive to what befalls people around us, and sadly what it takes for you to truly understand the situation is to experience it yourself. Julia Jones became part of the reports she made, with only us left to tell her story. This is one of my favorite logs in the game, just because of how messed up this entire thing is, and how it probably happened to some other poor reporter somewhere. Before we move on from Julia Jones, we have a bit of foreshadowing to cover. In one of her Announced Post of Progress articles, there's this line at the end that could have very well been hinting at the station's eventual fate. It reads, "Every day it feels as if the station has edged a little closer to freefall." It fits too well for it to be a coincidence. There are also some other examples sprinkled throughout the game, like in this audio log, where it mentions this.
"I think we may have broken our losing streak. We've barely been scraping a living the past couple of years, and the Anisadora is starting to look like the wrecks we salvage. Can't say the crew's been faring any better. Then we found that flight recorder. It belongs to a ship, the Nostromo, Wayland-Yutani property. That means there'll be a reward." But then Marlowe had an even better idea. Extrapolate the path of the flight recorder to try to find the wreck of the Nostromo. We got lucky. Found a distress signal, and now we're following it. This is it. I can feel it in my bones. He always said he'd do right by me.
For context, the person speaking here is Foster's, the woman who got impregnated by the facehugger and had the xenomorph burst out of her in Sevastopol. Purposeful writing, or lovely coincidence? Who knows? She did end up feeling it in her bones after all, or chest, or whatever that godforsaken thing plants as offspring. And lastly, there is this log. "We need you down in reactor maintenance floors. I've got reports of localized brownouts all over the station. I know it's going to hell on station, but I can't see anything up here that will be compromising power delivery. Can you run a full systems check down there? Chief." You get to read this log right before you descend into the reactor and discover the nest. So this acts as a tiny bit of foreshadowing for keen readers. Those not being me. I did not pay attention to half of this game's story when I was playing for the first time. Too busy dealing with more pressing matters. Incorrect chess sets. Sprinkled throughout the game are these chess sets that are just completely wrong. The board orientation is messed up, and so is the placement of the Black Queen and the White King. At first I was like, maybe it's just this one chess set that's set up wrong, because whoever was playing doesn't know the rules or something like that. But nope, it's just the same asset. I've yet to see a game that's not focused on chess have accurate chess sets, and I'm disappointed that's also the case here. Attention to detail isn't spread equally, sadly. At least it's not The Last of Us. They didn't even bother there. It almost looks AI generated. I'm not even actually sure if that's chess, actually. Maybe it's not. Who knows? Ransom. Ransom is an interesting character in that he's a classic example of corporate executive douchebag who only cares about his bottom line. For example, after the head of synthetic development, Smythe, noticed that the Seegson androids pale in comparison to the Weyland-Yutani ones, and calling for some sort of investment, Ransom replies with this.
Smythe, I've been looking over your report on the Weyland-Yutani androids and your proposals for improving the working Joes. Now, I appreciate the work you put in, but understand we live in different worlds. Yours is full of extrapolations and estimations. Mine has an executive suite and $8,000 suits. Bottom line is, I gotta look after the money, buddy. I hired you because you were the cheapest, not the best. Find a way to bring these costs down, huh? Ransom out.
This, funnily enough, came back to bite him in the ass after one attacked him in his apartment, as shown here.
This is Seegson Executive Ransom speaking. I just woke up to find a working Joe in my suite, and when I asked what the hell it was doing, it lunged for me. I had to leave my own apartment. Send your best technicians to Apollo Core and find out what the hell is going on. Now! Get those things under control. I want a full report ASAP.
We get to see the same android in his suite in the DLC. Seems like Ransom can defend himself. He was also a master manipulator, a narcissist. I mean, this guy had a statue of himself built, and I assure you it wasn't someone else's idea. And absolutely loved blackmail. I mean, this guy would blackmail twice a day minimum. He gathered dirt on people by hacking into private messages and camera systems, something which stayed undiscovered for so long. In one instance, he threatened Dr. Lingard's position into giving him samples of the xenomorph after he, allegedly, found out about it from one of his rats in the Colonial Marshals, the law enforcement on Sevastopol, which he also hacked. Following this, he also did, I'll let you guess here, some more blackmail, this time to Gemini Exoplanet Solutions, so they would analyze the samples quietly, as shown here.
Seegson Executive Ransom here. I'm sending over some samples for investigation. I want the minimum number of employees on this. Keep it on the down low and report only to me. If any of this gets out, I'll make sure your career dies with Sevastopol. There are a lot of inconsistencies in Gemini's ledgers. Do right by me, and I'll remember you. Whatever you're skimming now will seem like chicken feed. Do the smart thing.
This was all in an effort to basically sell the xenomorph to Weyland-Yutani, and while people were dying and getting stuffed with chest-bursting aliens, he was looking for a way to capture it alive, for profit, something which he suggested to Marshal Waits in a message, a member of the Colonial Marshals.
Waits, we should talk about what happened in San Cristobal. Now, it was a nasty business, and I understand that you want to deal with it as quietly and quickly as possible. But I wanted to make sure you didn't do anything rash. I'm talking about catching the specimen without killing it. If we play it smart, we could be set up for life. I have the connections. I can set it up. You're getting old, Waits, you can't do this forever, and what are you going to do when Sevastopol closes? You have my number. Ransom out.
Now, it also seems like Ransom was blackmailing people with things that he was the leader of. In this log, it's implied that Ransom is protective of the blackmail market, and is subsequently a part of it, where he mentions some import documents that someone's been looking too closely into, which makes me believe that it's indeed related to the black market business. Riggs, are you still working down in Seegson Communications? Remember that trouble you got into last year? The trouble I helped you out of? Well, it's time to repay the favor. One of my colleagues has been looking into some of the import documents and found a few problems. He's new, so he doesn't understand how we do things on Sevastopol, and he's threatening to go to Waits about it. This could hurt us all, so I need you to keep an eye on him. See if anything interesting comes up. Apollo has cameras everywhere. It just needs someone to tell it where to point to. His name is Daniel Holden, lives in Josiah Sick Executive Apartment 651. If this goes well, I might have some work for you. we could clean up here. Ransom. But he uses the fact that Lingard was engaged in the black market to blackmail her, so what gives? Maybe it's a case of him being too powerful to threaten, but I'm not sure. If you have an idea, feel free to drop it down in the comments. One last concrete example that I could find is Ransom threatening Hughes in this log.
Hughes, it's Ransom. I just got your query. Yes, I have been in our transmission relay archive and I've done some decrypting. I'm looking for crew logs that passed through Sevastopol a while ago. I know you're concerned, but it's ancient history. There's just some stuff I need to know. A routine company transmission packet sent from the edge of Thetis before a ship started its trip home. Nothing that's gonna break anything. Still, no one else needs to know about it, right? If you talk, well, there'll be consequences. I mean, there's plenty Marie doesn't know, right? Leave them decoding and let me know when they're done. We can keep this civil.
The first conclusion after hearing that jumps to mind is that poor old Hughes was actually cheating on Marie, but I'm more inclined to think it had to do with the notorious black market. I just hope it's not the former, because Hughes really seemed like a nice guy. One thing that cracks me up about Ransom is right in his name. The only character that's infamous for blackmailing in this game being called Ransom is just lovely. And lastly, we have his fate. Ransom, despite his attempts to entice the company with the xenomorph, had been hung out to dry by them, which, after purchasing the station, closed down all communications and consequently Ransom's assumed contact with them. He then sent this message.
This is Seegson Executive Ransom reporting into the board. You sons of bitches. I was loyal to you, and you cheap bastards left me twisting in the wind. I was gonna give you the find of a lifetime. I was willing to risk my life for the company. I could have called in a special team, secured the specimen, and we all would have been happy, but Apollo has cut all communications. None of the technicians in Apollo Corps are answering my messages. We're all dying here, you bastards. You threw it all away. You and your company. You.
This message has a twofold meaning for me. First is that it shows that in the corporate world, the big fish eats the little fish, and Ransom, despite his executive suites and $8,000 suits, was deemed just as expendable as the rest of them. It also shows that he still has a bit of compassion, with the line, "We're all dying here." I think a more selfish version of the character would have only mentioned himself. We also see him, or play as him, saving a civilian from burning to death in the DLC, so he is a human after all. As for his eventual fate, we don't really know. There are a couple of leads though. Two of them happen to be cut, however, as in a deleted section of the game that had a ship called the Solace, it's revealed that he met his fate while escaping Sevastopol aboard it. In addition, we have the ambulance, as well as the executive shuttle, the first of which we use to go to the Unisidora later in the game. We're told that they're short range and are supposedly not designed for anything else other than that, but who knows. Ransom could have tried his luck with them, but I don't think he would have gone very far. And as far as I'm aware, the Torrens is the only ship that was available before the station fell into the gas giant. One other final tidbit is his stark resemblance to Burke, the character from Aliens. While I consider Burke to be considerably more evil, he and Ransom both disregarded human life pretty easily. Both wanted to capture the xenomorph for their own financial gain, and we have some sketches in-game that bear a striking resemblance to Burke. It could be that the devs took inspiration from him but changed up some stuff, like his love for blackmail. Lingard. In stark contrast to Ransom, Lingard is one of the good ones. She's a doctor and was one of the few remaining ones on Sevastopol during the crisis, and the only one who, despite the threat on the station, continued to look for ways to help her patients and the people who needed her. When the Unisidora boarded Sevastopol, she tended to Catherine Foster and saw that thing burst out of her chest. Horrified, she blamed herself and thought that her attempts at saving the woman caused the creature to be born. We see this more clearly in the video she records.
This is Lingard, Senior Medical Officer at Sevastopol Station. I want to state for the record. I have been placed under duress with regards to the compromise Patient Zero. And Ransom, Seegson's head of operations, he made certain threats for my career and my certification. I want that on record. God. Help me. That woman needed help. I didn't know what type of parasite she had encountered, but it had planted something inside her. I am so sorry. I had no way of knowing what would happen.
When I first saw this, I immediately assumed she was responsible for the whole fiasco. She sounded so damn guilty. She also mentions threats to her certification. Now, we know this is because of her dealings in the black market, but that could probably be attributed to her looking for medicine that wasn't available through any other means. Her job as a medical practitioner really suited her, as selfless as one can be. In the DLC, we get to play as her in one of the missions that's based on her struggle to acquire the medicine and get back to her patients, whom she finds massacred by the working Joes. Along the way, however, she encounters a hive, and this is notable because it's only one of 3 instances in the entire game. First one is deep in the reactors, second is where Ripley gets dragged off near the end of the game, and here. This damn race of aliens is adamant on surviving no matter what, and what's even more terrifying is it just takes one of them to breed and populate to this size. Her fate, much like Ransom, is unknown, and we can only theorize about what happened to her. The most likely option, however, is her dying with the station as it fell, as I don't think there were any means of escape other than the Torrens, and we all know how that went. Enemies here motion tracker. The motion tracker is a tool you pick up pretty early in the game, and it's key to your success. It can also be quite the opposite, as shown here. As you just saw, enemies can hear the beeping sound of the tracker if they're within a certain distance, but the thing is, the tracker isn't in any conventional unit of measurement. We see the letters ATT, SUC, and DEC, and those are most definitely attack, sustain, and decay, terms usually associated with envelopes in music. Why the decay is tied to the proximity of the objects, I have no idea. It's clear though that the number in the bottom left is a ratio, with 0 meaning whatever you're tracking is right on top of you, and 0.95 meaning it's way too far to even hear you. After some testing done by one of the members in the Alien Isolation Discord server, it was determined that the alien detects you at around 0.20 and lower, at least on novice difficulty. This is a great mechanic in my opinion, as it essentially turns the tracker into a double-edged sword. While it enables you to approximately know the location of your pursuer, use it too much and it gives yours away. Sinclair. Along with Ransom, Sinclair is the one character who I can say was also clearly morally corrupt. He dealt in the black market, and probably not for noble causes like Dr. Lingard, and when the infestation started, he showed his true colors. He was the head of Seegson security on the station, but still took orders from Waits and the marshals. That is, until he decided to cut ties with them, as shown here.
This is a message for all members of the Seegson security team. There's been an altercation in the spaceflight terminal. Waits doesn't have our back. As of right now, no one hired as Seegson security is going on shift. We're cutting ties with the marshals and everyone else on station. It's time to take care of our own. I'm gonna find some place safe for everyone to hole up. Money's dried up here. We don't owe these people nothing.
The altercation mentioned occurred when the disappearances reached a level that couldn't be ignored anymore, and people demanded answers. Marshal Waits and his team, however, did not supply them. Once again, Julia Jones is there to report.
Julia Jones, today's update. After numerous demands, Marshal Waits finally called a public meeting to address the rumors that have been circulating on Sevastopol. But instead of the answers we wanted, he continued to be evasive, and after only a few minutes, he and his team were pelted by projectiles from an angry crowd. A gun was fired, there was panic, and now Waits and what's left of his team are forcibly ejecting us from the terminal. Feels like we're on our own now.
So Sinclair stopped supporting Sevastopol and started searching for supplies, and procuring them by any means necessary, including killing and looting. Actually, primarily killing and looting. Another audio log shows this.
Guys, it's Sinclair. we need supplies. Take what you can from whoever you want. I've found an area in habitation where we can seal ourselves in and wait for rescue. I've got guys welding vents shut and shutting off elevators. Plan is to make it watertight. There's no room for more people in the sanctuary, but we can make space for their food, meds, water, and guns. If we're gonna get everyone through this alive, there's no room for pity.
And this log by Waits, it reads, Sinclair, I have verified the reports that you and your men are shooting civilians and looting supplies. When I find a way to kill this creature, I hope to hell that I found you first. Waits. He was also not below betraying his friends, as he shuts down a part of the station and takes the last transit before they're able to come back from searching for the Torrens. He says, quote,
I'm sorry, but when you started chasing after a ship that'll never come, you broke with the plan. Sinclair out.
He was brutal and merciless, and while you could argue that what he did was necessary to survive and to protect the ones that he cared about, including a lot of children, did it have to be in this manner? Gangs rise up very quickly in apocalyptic scenarios, as we've seen in countless examples in media over the years. It quickly devolves into an us versus them mentality that is sure to end in a bloodbath. It's almost like a default state that people just go into whenever faced with mortal danger and lack of rules and civilization, and resources for that matter. Sinclair was the first one to jump at this opportunity. He realized that he could utilize his team of already loyal members to band together and have a greater chance of survival. Other civilians be damned. I guess the main catalyst for this is mainly fear. In a perfect world, one would like to imagine that when humans are faced with these life-threatening scenarios, they would all join forces and face the threat as a united front. But fear clouds people's judgment greatly, and you end up having unfortunate situations such as Sinclair. He wasn't completely heartless though. In one log, he warns anyone not on his team that if they come searching for him, they will shoot on sight. However, when one of the survivors, Winters, goes over to the habitation sanctuary in desperation, they only shut the door in her face. Whether this was because they were merciful, guilty, realized she'll die anyways, or just wanted to avoid that whole interaction for fear of attracting a monster, we're not sure. Despite his best efforts, Sinclair met his fate like most of the survivors on the station, and left this final recording.
Last will and testament of some fuck you don't give a shit about. We couldn't keep them out. My wife is dead. My children have been taken. I tried, but I couldn't stop them. They broke through our defenses. There's so much blood on my hands. This is for the rescue party, for Seegson, or I don't know, whoever has to clean up this mess. We held out in here as long as we could. You didn't come fast enough. You did. Just send in the Marines or blow this place up. Take these creatures back to hell.
A pack of xenomorphs broke into the sanctuary and slaughtered everyone. You'll notice his display of guilt and regret in the message. I think in his last moments he realized how futile it all was, and how many innocent lives he took from people who were just trying to survive. And he undoubtedly mourned the death of his wife and children, and his failure to protect them. Despite all of what he did, you can't help but feel bad for him. Now, there is one small hitch here. The line, "there is so much blood on my hands," could refer to the fact that he may have been responsible for the infestation itself, but that's a different matter entirely that we'll address in a later entry. Special Order 939. After Weyland-Yutani bought the station and installed its brand new operational rule set package in its central AI, Apollo, a station-wide scan commenced where it was discovered that there is an alien presence within the reactor systems, at which point Special Order 939 was initiated. This 900 series of special orders is arguably more of a death sentence to the stations that receive it than the xenomorph itself. In the case of Sevastopol, communications were shut, the station was quarantined, and the android populace turned hostile to protect the specimen, and eventually, when we jettison the first alien we encounter, are unleashed to hunt down any and all remaining humans that may act as a threat to the alien. I really love this, I don't even know how to describe it, almost plot device. In both Alien and Alien Isolation, it ensures that whoever encounters the alien in a Weyland-Yutani owned ship is, well, isolated. No comms, no help, no nothing, and any synthetics that Weyland-Yutani got their hands on immediately turn into mass murdering creatures carrying out its will. There's also that lovely bit of irony where, while the alien is the main threat here, the actions of humans are the ones that expedite the killing process, something which we'll address in more detail later. Silent Stun Baton. In a game where every little sound you make can mean probable death, the stun baton is particularly useful, since it's silenced. If you use it on humans, they're instantly incapacitated, and on androids, it stuns them for a good while, which is what I mainly used it for. This, however, does not work on the Super Joes you meet later in the game, which is something I found out the hard way. 1702. In one of the game's most infamous missions, Mission 5, you're in San Cristobal Medical Facility searching the area for a key code and a key card. All is going well, until it isn't. When I first saw this, I instinctively hid and crouched and went with this encounter like all the others, with extreme stealth. However, I soon realized that this is a cutscene, and the alien doesn't actually detect you if you aren't past it here. So the strat that I discovered, which is also used in speedruns, I'm happy to say, is to just leg it after the alarm sounds off, enter the code, and go to the next station. The code also happens to be the birthday of Will Porter, the writer I mentioned. There are a lot of little Easter eggs like this, as you would expect from any game really. And you can find references to the devs in codes, on posters scattered by the station, as well as the pictures you find on ID cards. Neat stuff. Quite a lengthy section, but we're done with the first layer of the iceberg. Now to take the plunge and explore what's underneath the surface. The Human Touch. An omen for the future can be found in one of the game's logs, titled Human Touch. It reads, "This is by way of a formal complaint to Station Medical. I do not want to be attended by an android. Any android. I'm a senior Seegson executive with a significant financial investment in Sevastopol. I should be treated appropriately, by which I mean by humans only." This sounds exactly like something that would happen in the future, possibly the near future, or actually, I'm pretty sure this situation already happened / could happen, as robotics are used a lot in medicine nowadays. We haven't gotten to the point of full-on androids treating you, but it's in the foreseeable future. Sort of. I think people will always have this rejection for certain non-human elements inserted into their lives. It's just unnatural, creepy, and smack dab in the uncanny valley. It also doesn't help that the android treating Barker looked like this. If this were a Weyland-Yutani synthetic, that would be a different story altogether. This also made me think of a funny dystopian outcome that could happen, where only the rich could afford being treated by actual humans, and the rest of the populace has to accept androids instead. Sort of like organic food versus artificial, except in a wholly different scenario. I can't wait what the future holds. So many man-made horrors beyond my comprehension waiting to be discovered. Coolman's Addiction. Coolman is a minor character that gets introduced and killed off in the span of 10 minutes, yet he still contributes something to the story in that he's the only doctor aboard the station who's kind of an asshole. Throughout some of the logs that we read, we learn of his addiction to mood stimulants that he's depriving actual patients in need from, as well as him leaving them in these recovery rooms for days at a time, and abandoning them in light of the decommission. He's also probably the one responsible for the android tending to Barker instead of an actual human, as on this whiteboard we see the patient named Barker and the physician assigned to him being Dr. Coolman. He's probably way too high to walk properly, let alone operate on someone, and so he has the working Joes carry out his tasks. Along with his inflated ego, as he considers working in Sevastopol a waste of his talents, he was also a much bigger asshole in the novelization, which we'll cover later, as he willingly uses Amanda as bait so he could make his escape, and the search for the keycard was a mere wild goose chase. Not cool, man. Hidden tutorials. Tutorials are an important subject in games because of the many ways they can be handled. There's the spell everything out for the player in excruciating detail before the game way, which is the worst in my opinion, as once I actually start to play, I'll have forgotten everything. And there's the one that's baked right into the gameplay, which Alien Isolation does. For example, Axel tells you that not every person you'll meet will be friendly, and lo and behold, you meet a neutral group and one that will shoot you on sight. This is already mentioned in the hints that pop up on the loading screen, but this in-game example serves to further cement that point. Moreover, you have the alien jumping down to attack humans who shoot at it in response with their guns, but to no avail, teaching you not to commit the same mistake, as well as the alien dropping down to kill Axel right after he shoots his gun, i.e. attracting it with the noise the gunshot made, along with the android brutally murdering Hughes, basically telling the player that the androids they've been talking to all this time have turned on kill mode. There's also Axel noticing the drool on his shoulder before being shanked, something that you can also experience in the game. It all works really well to telegraph to the player this information in an organic way. The interesting part is that there are even more subliminal hidden tutorials / hints that you may or may not pick up on. The most obvious one is this piece of graffiti: keep moving. You see it in a very early section of the game, and it's a solid strategy to avoid the alien effectively. I could only find 2 more, which for all I know were not intended as hints whatsoever, but they appear to be anyways. A log from Gemini Exoplanet Solutions reads, Gemini Exoplanet Solutions. Be bold, learn, adapt, live. Life is change. We grow by adapting and evolving to meet each new challenge. At Gemini Exoplanet Solutions, we take Mother Nature's blueprint as our starting point by breaking new ground, and by finding new applications for existing technologies. Fuel resources become building materials, weapon developments advance agricultural growth, space exploration is applied to surgical procedures. Look around, you may never know what might be useful. Sponsored by Seeks Investment Board. This being a survival horror game, you need to have a crafting system that's like a tenet of this type of game, and you'll find resources to build stuff everywhere, which Ripley, being the engineering genius she is, can construct into devices ranging from noisemakers to Molotovs, all very DIY. To be honest, the more I read this, the more it seems like they're actually referencing the game's crafting system, which originally was way more elaborate than it is now. In the first draft of the game, you could actually make the weapons yourself, as well as the motion tracker, which was a whole entire section. I don't know, it's plausible at least. And the third one, which is this poster. It could allude to the fact that you need to be careful with your resources and not use them willy-nilly. The game also explicitly tells you not to waste bullets, as they are scarce to come by. These posters are actually rife with hidden messages, and are just so interesting to examine, which we'll do in due time. How was Sevastopol built? Sevastopol is gigantic. This thing is unbelievably colossal, and I have absolutely no idea how they managed to build it and put it into space. I know this universe has faster than light travel and androids that are indistinguishable from humans, but I don't know, I just can't fathom it. I guess what they would have had to do is make every part and launch it into space one by one, then fit it in there until the entire thing was built, much like the real-life International Space Station. Same with the refinery that the Nostromo was hauling in Alien, both insane feats of engineering. I couldn't really find anything on this topic, which I mean, yeah, people suspend their disbelief for a lot of things in the Alien universe, and would have just accepted the station for what it was. References to the Alien movies. There are a fair bit of Easter eggs and references to the Alien movies, mostly the first one, which makes sense given it's the one the game was heavily based on. I'm going to go through them in no particular order. There is a chance that the Working Joes will dance on the spot, shown here. If you've watched the Alien movie, and I really hope you did if you're this far into the video, you'll immediately recall Ash doing this exact movement, albeit much faster since he's a Weyland-Yutani model, and much more advanced. There's also this.
Esto podría requerir mi atención. Correr produce accidentes.
I'm almost positive this is some sort of glitch, as in game glitch, not intended Android glitch by the designers. It looks funny regardless. There are also set dressing Easter eggs, like these blue thingies that bob up and down, and these birds that move to and fro. I'm actually not sure what they're called. They're present throughout the first film, albeit shrouded in shadow half the time. We also have this code, which is so prominent you'd think it unlocks another spaceship, but it doesn't have any use as far as I'm aware, and the code is just the date that the first Alien movie was released in, 1979. This magazine that's supposed to be James Cameron, the director for Aliens, fantastic movie by the way, totally worth it if you like the first one, despite what many people say, the genre shift worked to the movie's advantage. Anyways, this poor bastard Smythe, with a magazine stuffed down his throat. It references Ash trying to choke Ripley in the same way in Alien. It was really jarring when I first saw it, a terrifying way to die. If you look really closely at the Alien model, you'll notice a skull covered by the translucent film around its head, which harkens back to the same skull that was present in the original Alien back in 1979, which sadly wasn't very visible in the movie, but which you can clearly see in the game. And lastly, we have this. There's a lot of stuff in the game that implies there were children on the station. I mean, one log just says it, but we of course never see them because of obvious reasons. This one instance though is really shocking, because it's the first time you see a clear sign that a child was here, did some doodles and probably played with a little robot. The sketch also has something that is probably a drawing of the alien, with its bulbous head, legs and mandible, as well as something on the left that I can't quite discern. There's also another mention of 1979. This exact drawing is actually present way earlier in the game, albeit quite hidden, and is just a case of reused assets. That's about it for references, but I'm sure there are more that I missed. If you know any others, feel free to write them down in the comments. A myriad of mistakes. There are a shit ton of mistakes in the game, more often than I would have liked, actually. For example, if you cross-examine the dates given, you'll find that there are some inconsistencies, along with some other details, as well as this type of error that gets on my nerves. The audio logs and their transcriptions being wildly inconsistent. Take a look at this example here in log 76.
I am recording this for anyone else who was away when it happened. I can't tell who escaped. There are some boys, but the others were taken through the vents, one by one. The doors were locked, but the ceiling vents were open. There was nowhere to run and no one to let them out. It was like a fox dropping into a henhouse. I should move on. There's a camp of survivors who still trust the marshal in the mall. And then there's a Sinclair and his idiot man with guns, somewhere in habitation. But I doubt either will last the week.
The voice actress just jumps over this line. And I mean, who can blame her? Who does you even refer to here? It's baffling. Also, sometimes there are entire sequences dropped or replaced. And what's worse is that normally when you collect some recordings, you can hear them in the menu, except for the ones that you can't. So in order to hear those, you either need to backtrack to their physical location in the game, or try to find them online somewhere. Glitches are also rampant, some of them so severe that they can get your save file soft-locked permanently. There was also this one time where the motion tracker just straight up refused to pop up for me. At least speedrunners are putting these glitches to good use. And for the most egregious, unforgivable, utterly shameful mistake, they forgot a dot after the A in USA on the motion detector. Absolutely abhorrent. 0 out of 10 game. Multiple aliens. Whenever you encounter the alien, it's implied that it's the same one throughout. This is backed by several facts. First is that after you jettison it from the station, you're not harassed by any annoying aliens for a while, up until you meet 2 of them in the hive. It's a nice moment that shows that all the elaborate planning and risk he went through to get rid of that first one was practically meaningless. Another thing that hints at it being the same alien is that it learns from your actions, so it must be the same one. However, there is another argument that it was in fact multiple aliens since the beginning, and you only happened upon one at a time. It would explain why it can basically teleport across the station even though it can't access the tram network, and that its gradual learning could be a side effect of there being more than one survivor on the station using the same tactics as you. We know for a fact that there is more than one flamethrower on the station, as we come across a few in the DLC missions, so it is a possible explanation. In addition, and this could be a bit of foreshadowing more than anything, we see corpses with chest burst marks on them, indicating that there should have been a gazillion aliens roaming about from the sheer number of them lying around. It's also possible that these marks were caused from the alien's tail penetrating its victims, but I digress. My theory for all of this is that there were indeed multiple aliens from the very start, and either only one of them was active before you come across the hive, or they sort of alternated shifts, and the rest stayed near the reactor area to build the hive and defend it. Only one drone is actively hunting and impregnating people, and this only stops after the hive is purged out of existence, at which point we can even meet 2 at a time in normal gameplay, and 3 in the final section. This is not taking into account the 6 that emerge from the hive when it detonates. Maybe they increased the number of drones and deemed Ripley too large of a threat to simply ignore. Who knows? I do think this theory at least manages to explain this phenomenon without too many holes, but let me know what you think down in the comments. Samuel's superiority. Samuel's is a synthetic. This fact was unbeknownst to me until Waits mentioned it offhandedly, and I was very surprised that such a detail was mentioned without any fanfare. Apparently the clues were always there, and I just haven't seen them. When you first wake up from hypersleep, he says this.
Samuels, did you wake up early?
Well, I don't really need as much sleep as the rest of you. I was just inspecting the Torrens facilities. A well-maintained ship.
I simply thought he was saying he was built different, to imply he was experienced or something. There's also this animation that you can observe if you stay in the Torrens for a good while, staring at him until he does it. He does it to the same pace as the androids, which messes with the whole idea that the working Joes are inferior. In any case, the working Joes are still slower than Ash if we only compare those two. Even if their idle animation speed is the same, which can be chalked off to other reasons, maybe Weyland-Yutani reduced their speed afterwards and Seegson copied that too, since we know they stole some stuff off of them to improve their androids, but that's neither here nor there. Anyways, the main reason for this entry's existence is this scene, which highlights the superiority of the Weyland-Yutani synthetics compared to the working Joes.
All permissions rescinded.
I don't have time for this.
My man beat him to a pulp without even trying, and it was a lovely piece of exposition that just worked implicitly. This also harkens back to that one android beating Hughes to death, so it adds to the satisfaction of seeing the android being beaten the same exact way. There are also more displays of Samuel's prowess in the destroyed androids strewn about in Seegson synthetics, with their heads off their shoulders and torsos separated from their bodies, all implied to be Samuel's doing. One other fact about him that I'd like to mention is why he's not hostile towards us. It's the simple fact that the directives that were installed aboard Sevastopol were done so 2 days after they left on the Torrens, so the company wouldn't have had the chance to modify his directives. Thus, he's cooperative instead of destructive. The beacon fixes a plot hole. In the events of Alien, the crew aboard the Nostromo goes to LV-426 to investigate a signal they detect, which they find to have come from a derelict ship. When they eventually leave, that signal is still emitting, as one would assume. However, in the sequel Aliens, we know that a colony has set up on the planetoid, with no knowledge of the derelict nor of the alien presence. This wouldn't really make sense if the signal is still emitting, as they would have surely detected it. In comes Alien Isolation, where a flashback shows Marlowe and the crew of the Isidora follow the trail left by Nostromo's black box. They tread in the footsteps of the Nostromo crew and enter the derelict, except this time Marlowe explores it a bit more and finds a beaming blue beacon, which he promptly turns off so that no one would be able to find the ship and steal their find. It's honestly such a fitting fix to the plot hole, which cements Alien Isolation in the canon of the franchise at large. One other detail that's worth mentioning here is that Anisadora is another name for Pandora, an obvious relationship given that they were the ones who brought the horror that is the alien upon the denizens of Sevastopol and opened Pandora's box, so to speak. Some people said that it's on the nose, but I think it's great. What would have actually been on the nose is if they named her Pandora directly, but Anisadora is a better ship for a name anyways. The mini guitars aboard Sevastopol. There are so many guitars on this station. It's like an abundance. I thought there was only one in this location because I've forgotten about all the others, and it seems jarring to me to see such a human object lying around here in this otherwise foreign-looking space station, so it took me by surprise. But apparently there are quite a few more. This is not counting those aforementioned countless little birds and goofy blue creatures that bob up and down, and the pictures, but I don't know, a guitar stood out to me more for some reason. I guess it makes sense if someone was musically inclined, this would be a decent transportable instrument to carry about, but really, how many guitarists are actually on the station? They should start a band, composed purely of guitar players. The Sevastopol Strummers. There, already found them a name. Lockers are bad. Staying in one place in this game is a big no-no, and lockers are well known for, well, locking stuff. Specifically your person while the alien comes and smells you from top to bottom. If you recall the AI of AI entry, the alien eventually manages to zone in on your location, which is why it seems that whenever you enter a locker, the alien quickly follows suit. There's also the fact that if the alien is inspecting the locker you're in, you have to hold your breath so it doesn't hear you, and if you do this for too long, you start taking damage. This can be detrimental on higher difficulties, especially Nightmare, since supplies are much harder to come by, and you won't be able to heal yourself from the damage you took. Double-edged sword, much like the tracker. More mechanics like these should be in games. It adds so much depth and always have to weigh the pros and cons before you do anything, and in a horror game, that amplifies the fear tenfold. Psycho running. This is a speedrunning strat that's practically game-breaking. It involves continuously pressing crouch and sprinting diagonally, at which point your character won't make a peep. This occurs because Ripley only makes the loud sprinting sound around half a second into the animation, and by pressing crouch and standing up, you cancel it just before it makes that sound. Since the whole game revolves around the handicap of moving slowly for fear of being heard, you can move through areas stupidly fast, and what's more is that it's not that difficult to do in a casual playthrough. Like I said, this game is broken as hell at times. With that, we're done with the second layer. The lights of Sevastopol are starting to dim, and every step through its corridors reverberates against its walls. The bottom of the iceberg awaits. The Chameleon Effect. This is probably my favorite entry in the Iceberg, just because of how prevalent it is in the game, but also one can't be sure if half of its examples are intended or not. I'm talking about this. Did you notice anything in common with those pictures? Well, when I was playing, I sure didn't, but they all bear some resemblance to our titular alien, or they're designed to evoke some sort of fear given their shape. The first one is clearly a case of pareidolia, the phenomena of seeing patterns, most commonly faces, where they're not really intended to be. In this case, however, it's most probably intentional. It looks like a monster with tendrils around its head and its mouth agape, waiting to eat its victims whole. You can also notice smoke coming out of its mouth. The more I look at it, the more purposeful it becomes. There are also these tendrils which look like the alien's head and limbs. This area is also very interesting as you have two things at work here. The red floor, a color that's rare to see in this game, and when I first entered, I thought the entire place was drenched in blood, likely the intended effect, as there's an android on the right here, seemingly spilling said blood onto the floor. And this mess of wires in the ceiling, which starkly resembles the alien, with its bulbous head hunched over and waiting to pounce at any second. It's very reminiscent of that scene in Alien, where Ripley doesn't notice it until it shows itself, since it camouflages so well in the environment. There's also this three-pipe pattern, which is everywhere in the game, as well as these round vessels or generators or something, I'm not sure, that from this specific angle look extremely similar to the alien. There's also this absolutely beautiful example, which freaked me the hell out the first time I saw it, as in I actually thought it was the alien. In addition to this one, found in the Anisadora, which might as well be the actual alien model being there given the similarity. There's this clip on Reddit I found of someone's reaction to encountering it, and it is gold.
Well, Ricardo, not being able to hear her sweet, sweet voice, man, makes me feel like... Oh, ah! Oh my god! No way! Are you kidding me? I can't believe I fell for this! Son of a bitch! God damn it! God damn it! I fell for this and I forgot about it! Oh my god, I feel like an idiot right now. I'm clipping this.
This game's mastering and fooling you twice and harboring no shame whatsoever. But the one that prompted me to do this whole entry is not one of the obvious ones, but this jumble of wires right here. While crawling through these vents, I thought it was a corpse lying at the end. But I've seen corpses in vents before, that's nothing new. It's the fact that it seemed like one, but my brain just filled in the gaps is what got me. Incredible design. While I was looking for more examples of this effect, I saw this one in a YouTube video. I'll let it play. You caught that? Just a clear example of the alien lying in wait for its prey. The maker of the video thought so too, as well as the comments, as this is a video on hidden xenomorph locations, which we'll cover later. Not of things that resemble the alien. It was that convincing, but it's just a part of the rails that the carts slide on. And finally, there's this poster. And it could be just seeing things at this point, but that calligraphy on the R looks suspiciously like the noggin of the xenomorph. There's also blood dripping from the flower itself, so that's probably related. This effect or phenomena, or whatever you want to call it, is present all over alien media. And while researching for this video, I watched Alien and Aliens. The examples in the first one are all well documented and have been replicated in the game, but there was this instance that I found in Aliens that I just had to include somehow. We have this shot of a man being attacked by a facehugger. Then it cuts to Ripley, and the first thing we see is her hand. It's such an obvious similarity that no one comments on in the movie, of course. No one's gonna come out of the screen and tell you, hey, did you catch that, did you? But I don't know, I just found it fascinating. Alien Isolation makes you doubt whether all of these countless examples are intentionally put in by the developers, or whether your brain is just so fried from facing the alien so often that you're seeing things in the shadows. Which adds immensely to the horror. You can't even trust your mind, and whether it's just conjuring stuff from thin air, because it very well could be. We don't know if these examples are intentional or not. This is mainly because a lot of them are just vague enough for you to think that they're just mere coincidences. You can also absorb these unconsciously, unaware of what exactly is making you this uneasy. If you believe something to be true, then your mind jumps through so many hoops just to convince you of it. To illustrate what I mean, after it's revealed that there's a hive with numerous aliens mucking about, I jumped to the conclusion that these were sort of teenager aliens, due to the fact that I saw the eggs and thought that they were just born and haven't fully developed, even though we've never seen something like that before. And we already know that the xenomorph reaches adulthood incredibly quickly from the time it's born, so there's no phase where it can even exist as an adolescent alien for any meaningful period. Anyways, in spite of that, I really believed this to be the case, and so whenever I came up close to the alien or was killed by it after the hive part, I thought, damn, that's a different model, it looks younger and thinner, and even has different animations, even though nothing at all has changed. I just formed my own conclusions, and because of them, my perception of the aliens themselves were altered. This harkens back to seeing things in the station. When you've been conditioned to fear the xenomorph for so long and to look out for any sign of its presence, that shiny black pipe and its screeching hiss of steam might as well be the alien itself. Mike Tanaka and the Twitter code. Of all the people we learn about in Sevastopol, Mike Tanaka is the most characterized, simply because he had an entire Twitter account in which he posted updates on his life in Sevastopol, as well as his death. This also implies that Twitter still exists in 2137, and that it's called Twitter and not X. So either Mike Tanaka still refused to call it X after 114 years, or they changed the name back. Anyways, in a far-off room in the station that can only be accessed if you do this convoluted backtrack, you come across Mike Tanaka's corpse, showing signs of an alien attack, which left him mortally wounded. A bunch of sketches could be found in this room, along with a safe and an audio recording. And if you search for his employee ID number on the internet, you would get his Twitter account, where he documents how he came to Sevastopol as a systems archivist. He had a wife and 2 daughters whom he loved very much, and continued to send them updates. As you scroll up through the tweets, you learn of what he did and discovered, as well as how the situation evolved in Sevastopol, starting with a few disappearances and ending in complete carnage and chaos. In one of the last tweets, you find a code, and you can use it to open the safe, which has a lot of supplies that Tanaka collected/made. He was also an avid artist, and made sketches of a lot of people on the station, including Ransom, Lingard, Axel, Waits, and none other than the xenomorph itself. He drew a total of 3 for the creature, all of them splattered with blood. It's interesting because this means that he drew those while bleeding out, and wanted to document it to warn future would-be victims. One of them has some Japanese writing, which translates to teeth, claws, and tail respectively. There's also this writing under its mouth, which I don't think is Japanese, and could be just, HSSS, as in the hissing of the alien. Who knows? He also recorded what is probably the most tragic log in the game, and chronologically the last one you can get, titled Goodbye.
I'm so sorry. You were right. I never should have come here. Please tell Beth and Heidi. Tell them that I love them more than anything. Oh gosh, it hurts so much. I found something, Anne. I don't know what it was, but I found it. Now it's killing me. It's killing everyone. I have to tell someone. It has to be right. I was so stupid, Anne. I should have stayed with you. I wish. I wish.
It's so heartbreaking to see another case of a parent leaving their children to never come back, where the circumstances are completely out of their control. Mike loved his children dearly. He called them jelly beans and pampered them with gifts throughout his stay in Sevastopol, sent them messages, and regularly showed his affection for them and his wife. A sketch of the family, the only colored one we can see from Tanaka, can be found in his Twitter. I wish more games did this sort of thing, where it blends the game world and the real world using means such as this. It's a creative medium for storytelling, in my opinion, and grounds the game in reality, making it feel more real. Not that it would lose anything if this sort of bridge didn't exist, it just adds this ARG feel that works really well. Mike Tanaka was a good man, who landed in the most unfortunate of circumstances, being stranded in space and filled with regret. 1984 Alien Game. A common theme with the codes you find in the game is that very few are without meaning. One of these is 1984, the code for a cabinet in the Solomon's habitation tower. This could be a reference to Alien 1984, the first quote-unquote real Alien game released in, you guessed it, 1984. Personally, I think it's too iconic of a number to be a coincidence. It could still be that, but that's less fun to talk about. There was actually another Alien game 2 years before this one, but it's just a Pac-Man clone and nobody really cares about it. The 1984 one is more of a crew management game, where your goal is to make sure that as many of the people aboard the Nostromo make it out alive, while facing the alien and one secret android. What strikes me more than anything is the insane graphical jump that occurred in 30 years. Today this game looks like the ugliest thing in the world, but back then it was acceptable. Fascinating to think about. The alien model still manages to look fairly intimidating, albeit a touch more green. Who was the rat in the Colonial Marshals? When the chest burster bursts out of Foster's chest, try saying that 3 times in a row, it's all kept very hush-hush to avoid panic. Unfortunately for the Marshals and Lingard, Ransom had a supposed rat in the Marshals, which he uses to blackmail Lingard in this message.
Dr. Lingard, this is Ransom. Remember me? Your friendly Seegson chief executive. Lingard, you don't drop by, you don't call. Aren't we pals anymore? Oh well, we're both busy people. And after all, I have lots of other friends. Some of them have badges. One of them told me you called Marshal Waits about a, shall we say, interesting find? I want in. No arguments. After all, how much does Waits really know about you? Not as much as your old friend here. And I bet he wouldn't be as understanding about black market med supplies. I look forward to your call, Doc.
Waits then gets wind of this as Ransom comes over to investigate and shows his anger in this recording.
Turner, we've had something go down here in San Cristobal. Tape off the scene and make sure it's not touched until Garcia comes in with forensics. Keep this quiet for now. I want total silence. Last thing this station needs is a panic. And one other thing. If I find out who leaked this to Ransom, I'll make them eat their badge. He turned up, quoted Seegson privileges, and had a ringside seat for the whole goddamn mess. This is a serious incident. I don't need Ransom making it more complicated. Do you read me? Waits out.
It's never revealed in-game who exactly this person Ransom had on the inside. I suspected it was Sinclair somehow, but I don't really think that's the case. And it's possible there wasn't a rat at all, and it was just a cover-up for something else. I asked this question on the Alien Isolation subreddit, and user Shane_ask said that he doesn't actually need a rat, because he's already hacked into a lot of the messages and cameras, including ones inside the Marshal Bureau. Quote, he claims to Lingard that he has friends with badges that told him about Foster, but that is likely a lie to cover up the fact that he's intercepting all the comms on the station. Once everyone finds out, they know to stop trusting communications, and gathering dirt on everyone gets that much harder for him. No one figures it out until Mike Tanaka starts archiving the messaging system. If that's the case, then props to Ransom for putting out a red herring like that, though it's also equally likely that he really did resort to bribery. Who really knows? Dumb ways to die. There are a lot of ways to die in this game. You can get shot, burned to death, explode, punched to death, electrocuted, strangled, choked. Okay, those are practically the same. die from toxic gas, die from holding your breath for far too damn long, getting face-hugged, hit by a train, and of course, killed by the xenomorph. What interests me, however, is the variety of animations for some of these. For example, the alien can catch you hiding in footlockers, and there are 4 unique animations for this. The 4th one was particularly difficult to find, and thanks to one of the members of the Alien Isolation speedrunning Discord, CatVR, he was able to track it down. Here it is being compared with the 3rd animation, which is quite similar. There is also a chance of you dying if you take too long at the end of the game. I dawdled around here, near where one of these aliens is perched, and this happened. I tried it again later, but nothing happened. You can even get killed while taking out the pins, which I thought would be too evil for the game to do. But nope, aliens can get antsy. Another animation which took me by surprise is this one. I never encountered it in game, and I'm glad I didn't. It's incredibly eerie. I'll let it play now. What gets me most is the fact that the working Joe clearly puts his finger to his mouth, as in to shush you. Who the hell programmed this behavior in them? They're just killing with malice at this point. One honorable mention is poor old Clark, who while trying to construct a pipe bomb got eviscerated in the process. We learn of his fate from this log. It reads, Jameson, Clark is dead. Last time I saw him, he was using some of the junk around the station to make explosives for protection. I told him to be careful, but when I got back from gathering supplies, there was just explosive damage and blood. I'm on my own now, so I'm going to come to you. Where are you, Elaine? Rest in peace, Clark. At least you didn't suffer. Probably. Oh, and by the way, this pipe bomb that he was making is something that I, and at least one other person I know, never came across throughout the entire game. I only found out that it existed from watching a playthrough, and apparently you can get it from a bunch of different places, not just this one. I guess it just wasn't properly telegraphed. The cat. There is a cat aboard Sevastopol, or at least was. We can hear it in this clip, near an area where you meet Axel. The cat screeched at the end, and it sounds like the alien killed it, but we know from Alien, the movie, that it doesn't care for creatures that it can't impregnate, since it left Jonesy alone. So this cat was probably just scared off from the alien hitting something or other. It belonged to the late Hughes, who we see earlier being brutally beaten to death. He tells his wife to pick up this cat and his daughter in this log.
Marie, listen to me very carefully. I want you to leave work now, collect Claire, pick up the cat, and head home. We need to find someplace safe till Seegson send a ship. I saw the guy from down the hall. I can't remember his name, the one in the dirty baseball cap, weird smell. He had something in his coat. I think it was a gun. He just looked right through me. Don't talk to anyone. Don't tell them where you're going. I'll meet you as soon as I can.
A tragic fate for the entire family, and many others on the station too. I wonder if Hughes was literally the only one with a cat on station. That would have been funny. No one else bothered to or likes animals enough, and it's just your cat that's chilling there. If there were more animals, we probably would have seen some. The alien wouldn't have killed them, and the humans would have had little reason to do so. Unless they made too much noise. I wonder what the cat's name was. Humans are the real danger. There is a theme / motif in the Alien franchise, or at least Alien, Aliens, and Alien Isolation, as those are the ones that I've seen, where humans are painted to be a greater threat than the aliens themselves. A log by a Winters mentions this directly.
I have been camped out in Galleria Mall for maybe 24 hours. The people here, they're scared, but they still believe that Marshal Waits will kill the creature. They forget other dangers. They forget themselves. People are turning on each other for food, for water. I cannot stay here.
So you have the eternal greed of human corporations seeking to generate as much revenue as possible and hold as much power as possible at the expense of other humans. This happened in Alien when Wayland Yutani did Order 937 aboard the Nostromo and caused Ash to turn against the crew, decreasing their chances of survival and actively attempting to kill Ripley. And in Aliens, where Burke left Ripley and the little girl to die in cold blood, in addition to him causing the massacre to Hadley's Hope in the first place by telling them to go to the derelict's position without any warning whatsoever. We also have the people themselves posing a direct danger in Alien Isolation, where they will shoot you on sight if they're hostile, and in the events of the game before and during your arrival, where people turn to violence as a means of self-preservation. Yes, the alien in all of its intimidating glory is a force to be reckoned with, but we mustn't forget the people who brought it out of hibernation in the first place, and the ones who want to control it and make it part of their weapons division, the infamous Wayland Yutani. As Ellen Ripley said, the aliens are monsters, yes, but at least they don't turn on their own kind and deem them expendable at the first chance of profit. Motion Tracker's strange behavior in the Hive. When you descend into the Hive, you'll notice that your motion tracker is behaving quite strangely. It detects these sporadic movements that seemingly don't have a source. My first instinct was that these were either aliens that are behind the walls, on them, facehuggers moving about in their eggs, or the still but struggling captured humans that cover the walls of the Hive. These all would contribute to the motion tracker's reading. However, the wiki posits another completely different theory, which is that the structure of the Hive itself appears to have a disrupting effect on the motion tracker, in addition to the resin growing and moving. This is pretty much false, and has no basis in anything. It's just that the nest is filled to the brim with hundreds of moving creatures, and it's causing some sort of overload on the tracker, since it's been modified, and is not really meant to track such a large number of targets accurately. We even see this disruption in action in areas where we're not surrounded by the Hive directly. All in all, it really adds to the horror where instead of seeing the one or maximum 2 dots on your tracker, you see dozens. You've jumped into the beast's nest and you're surrounded. Working Joe's immunity. If the alien and Working Joe happen to be near each other, the alien will simply ignore it, while the android keeps curiously making comments. This is due to the fact that the alien knows/senses that they're not alive, and they're not suitable hosts. Their interaction is particularly chilling because it's just these two enemies that you've been fearing the entire game having a casual little chat, with lines such as, and my personal favorite, I find this to be an absolutely lovely line, because it's one of the only ones that deviate from the usual roster of pre-made lines that they regurgitate when they interact with the player. It shows such an innocent curiosity and unawareness of the danger that the xenomorph poses. One question that remains though is, how can the alien know that they're not suitable hosts? Can it see infrared light, merely recognizing their strange appearance, or something else? It makes sense in the case of the cat, since it just intuitively knows that it's too small for the chestburster, but for the androids it must be something else. Maybe it's an instinctive thing. The alien is smart, sure, but it's not familiar with every technology known to man. For example, if you throw a flare, you can observe it crouching and inspecting it curiously, as if trying to ascertain its purpose. Something to note is we do see androids ripped apart in other areas, and it's probably the aliens doing, so a conflict between them is certainly possible, but unlikely. Again, if you have any ideas as to how the alien disregards the Working Joes, drop it down in the comments below. Vending machines. There are a bunch of vending machines scattered around Sevastopol. I walked past dozens of them, thinking they were all just for show, since every time I approached one, it wouldn't dispense any delicious delights to aid me with the alien. Surprisingly though, the vending machines do work, just rarely. This explains where those packets of food you see strewn about the station came from, and I think if it happened to me while I was snaking about, it would have given me a right scare. I'm not exactly sure why I included this as an entry, but hey, no stone shall go unturned in this game while I'm around here. Who corrupted the black box and why? In the game, when you come across the black box that was the reason for Amanda's arrival on Sevastopol, you find it to be corrupted. Towards the final chapters, we find out that the contents of the black box have been saved on the Inisidora, which we view. Now, it's never really explained in the game who corrupted the black box, and it can only be assumed that it was Marlowe for fear of the company finding out where LV-426 was, and getting their greedy little hands on the xenomorphs. In the novelization of the story, however, which we'll cover in the next entry, it's revealed that Marlowe ordered Lewis, one of the Anisodora's crew members, to wipe the black box lest it fall into the hands of the company, which seems to be the most logical explanation anyways. I'm actually kind of glad the game doesn't spell it out for us. When we meet Marlowe on the Anisadora, he already explains his motives for why he wants to destroy the ship, and having him add this as a tangent to explain why the black box was corrupted would have probably felt tacky, in my opinion at least. You let the players put two and two together. There's also this goofy theory that I found, which posits that Marlowe couldn't extract all the data from the flight recorder unit and would have needed someone from Weyland-Yutani to get past certain security protocols. This is why we can hear it at the end, since he enlisted the help of Taylor, whom he accompanied aboard the Anisadora. I don't think he planned for Taylor to join him, since she's the one who offered in exchange for him leading her to LV-426, so I'm not sure how valid this theory is. The novelization. As with a lot of Alien media, Alien Isolation has a novelization. It was written by Keith R.A. DiCandido and published by Titan Books. The concept of a game turned novel was novel for me before I saw it, but it makes sense. If you'd like to experience the story of the game without risking multiple heart attacks in a row, this is a decent enough alternative. However, it does a lot of things that I don't like. For some reason, adaptations of already existing media tend to change some stuff, often tainting it in the process. Looking at you, The Lion King 2019. This is also the case here. Here are just a few examples of what I could glean from the wiki. In a section of the game, you attempt to trap the alien, but fail since you accidentally become trapped with it, and Ricardo, one of the marshals who aids you throughout your journey and is generally a nice guy, lifts the lockdown in order to free you. This is all well and good. It establishes Ricardo as a person with a heart who couldn't bear sacrificing a human soul, since his moral compass just wouldn't allow it. It makes us like him even more, and we are sadder when he eventually dies. In the novel, however, the security shutters just malfunction, and she's unable to close them. It completely removes that bit of characterization for no apparent reason. Remember Samuel's superiority? It's practically removed in the novel, as he just gets a gun instead to shoot the android down. The whole section with Sinclair's camp is removed, so you never learn their fate or of the massacre that befell them. And finally, and this is the worst offender, Ripley incinerates a xenomorph with a flamethrower, rendering this impenetrable beast to a mere killable foe. I excuse this in the second Alien movie because it was trying to provide a wholly different experience, but the whole point of this game was that you couldn't kill the alien. At best you could ward it off for a few moments, and this goes against all of that. There were of course more changes to the story that I haven't mentioned, but I either didn't deem them too disruptive, or they made sense given the medium. Suzanne and Spedding. There are a lot of mini-stories on Sevastopol. We've seen a lot of them now. Ransom's blackmailing, Sinclair going rogue, Tanika's untimely tragedy, and many more. One of these, which is not as significant as the others, is Suzanne and Spedding. Now, Spedding from the logs we hear was kind of an asshole. He treated his employee Smythe horribly, to the point where Smythe said that it's been pure hell working for him. It's really interesting to me how you get to read about the lives of these people who, for all you know, are all dead. It really puts stuff into perspective. Oh, this guy treated this other guy horribly? Well, they're both dead, and their corpses are rotting somewhere. It evokes this sort of finality to everything, as all these quarrels and mistreatment and just general wasting of time and life all ends in inevitable death. Alright, that was bordering on an existential crisis, but my point is, both Smythe and Spedding and Suzanne die. Suzanne is told by Spedding to stay in the showroom and to shut herself in, and the working Joes that are posing there menacingly are just display models, and she needn't worry about them. Well, guess what? We find her dead when we arrive, so they're not as safe as they seem. This is something that I didn't pick up on. My mind was just too entirely focused on the androids themselves, whom I inspected very closely in case they moved. I forgot that I had proof of their danger right in front of me. Before we move on to Spedding, I'd like to mention this accursed button right here. So, in the log in the terminal near Suzanne, you read about a lockdown button near Spedding's desk that's supposed to unlock the showroom. Well, I looked for this button everywhere. I spent an ungodly amount of time in this place and would have probably spent more if I didn't ask around. I guess this is just another case of the game not really directing the player well, as the game says it's near my desk, which would imply it's in the immediate vicinity, not in a random pillar on the far right. And I checked, I was not the only one who experienced this. Anyways, after Spedding tells Suzanne to sit tight, he investigates the cause of the androids going rogue, which leads him to Apollo, something he would come to regret as he would meet his fate there. A final log by him reads,
I'm in Apollo. There are androids at the door. Ransom's nowhere to be seen. There are conflicts with the hazard containment breach. Synthetic safety procedures are getting bypassed left and right. Comms are offline. I thought it was random, but I'm not so sure. Oh God, they're gonna get in. Tell Suzanne I love her.
Alien can use the vents. The vents are implied to be a sort of safe area for the player, where they can't be hunted by the alien since, come on, the game wouldn't be so cruel to put the alien after me in the only place I could catch a breath, right? But in fact, the game does exactly that, and even hints at it in one of the tips in the loading screen. For people who don't pay attention to those, or simply play on easier difficulties, will go hours without coming across an alien in the vents, but when it inevitably happens, it's absolutely terrifying. Blade Runner. Near an area at the start of the game, when you've entered Sevastopol, you can spot a little unicorn origami lying on a chair. This is an Easter egg referencing the Blade Runner movies, where this same origami hints at one of the characters' identity, them being a replicant, which are basically androids. I haven't watched the movie, so I can't delve more into the topic, but there is this article that mentions they can be found near the Working Joes. I'm not sure whether that's accurate or not, since I haven't had the chance to check every single one of them, but it's a cool Easter egg nonetheless. And no, this does not mean that they're in the same universe. Stop that, it's never gonna happen. 0482. This code is only worth mentioning because the way you acquire it is kind of convoluted. All of the game's logs are either written down in a terminal, recorded in a terminal, or on an audio recorder lying around in the station. This one, however, you get in Mission 10, where you have to inform some survivors that the alien is nearby, and they must quickly leave. But only in a specific sequence. You have to warn these survivors in the middle of the room, then one up the stairs to the left, and finally the last one here in the room near where you first come across the flight recorder. She then tells you a code that unlocks a room, where you can find several supplies as well as the medkit V2 upgrade. It's also possible to unlock this room another way, by using your torch to cut through the cover, which I did when I was backtracking. Glad that the developers put 2 ways to access it, or else it would have been frustrating. The scary door. This is the scary door. Now, as horrifying as that was, it's most likely just a bug. I'd like to speculate about eldritch demons hiding behind ominous doors as much as the next guy, but the truth is we see this exact glitch happen in other places in the station. Near a pipe, and in a random corner. And some other places that I didn't mention here. What causes this is probably a case of there being a trigger around those areas that wasn't deleted for some reason, or the devs simply forgot about it. One commenter speculates it could be a case of certain pieces of geometry that have their collision bit flag set incorrectly, and the raycasting code detecting Amanda as falling when she's in those areas, since she will also scream that way when falling. Point is, it's just a funny glitch that's pretty popular within the game's community, due to just how absurd it is. The little light that was shining through has now dimmed, and the iceberg silhouette is long past us. We descend into the depths. The alien stalks you. The alien makes a lot of unexpected appearances throughout the game, some that you might not even catch on your first playthrough. I mainly learnt about them from this gem of a video, and I'll show a compilation of my favorite ones. First one is when you're getting the maintenance jack, and you come across a coffee table on the way there, which you find knocked over when you return, along with some dust near a vent. Creepy. The alien skedaddling just out of view, and the earliest chance you get to see the alien, right after it impales Axel, while you're tensely waiting for the tram car to arrive. When you're in one of the walks outside the station, you can see this. I myself never noticed this, and seeing it here sort of relieves me in a twisted way, because whenever I was on these walks, I thought it was a bit too safe, and some sort of danger should be lurking somewhere. Guess my paranoia was justified. The alien sneakily hiding here just before it jumps you in Mission 6. You can just about see it if you look up in this direction, and here it's clearly shown if you go out of bounds. This out of bounds footage is from a video by Slippy Slides, How Does the Alien Work Off Camera, which is a fantastic watch if you want to learn more about the alien's antics. Again, another unexpected alien appearance. There are actually 3 xenomorphs here. One is patrolling in the back like a cat, and 2 pop up one by one as you activate the little extender thingamajiggies. I never noticed them on my playthrough, and was really surprised when 3 aliens jumped me out of nowhere. So many details to enjoy on the second time. And lastly, my absolute favorite one. This almost looks like it was modded in. So creepy, and I didn't catch it at all. Probably the only time you'll get to be this close to the xenomorph without it shattering your skull. I also read that you can see the alien outside in space after you eject it, but I couldn't confirm it. Probably doesn't exist. Alien is fascinated by green lamps. In Mission 10, when you jettison the alien into space, the alien can stop and gaze at this flashing green light. It might not seem significant since the alien inspects flares with the same demeanor, but this was actually taken from a cut part of the original film's script, Alien. It reads, "Slowly, green light throbbing inside airlock. Creature looks curiously at it. Moves onto the threshold. Int passageway B level. Parker watches. Int airlock. Creature moves further into airlock. Fascinated by green light." It's nice that the game managed to repurpose the stuff that didn't make it into the movie and pay an homage to it by including them in the game. It's like experiencing every possible thing that the original film had to offer. As for why the light is green, or whether that has any significance, I'm not really sure. Maybe the color itself is just striking for the xenomorph. Green isn't usually prevalent anywhere, and it could symbolize the aliens' fascination with humans themselves, their technology, and how it delights in preying on them. Some death animations support this as well, where the alien doesn't immediately take us out, but relishes its victim before finally killing them. Or maybe it's just a green light. The recovery rooms. In one of the rooms in the psychiatric facility on Sevastopol, you can hear this.
"You are in bed. It is warm and comforting. Someone you love is cooking breakfast downstairs. You can smell it, and it smells delicious. You are in a different room, but you are not far away. You are separate, yet you are connected. It will not be long until you are reunited. How do you feel? It is the morning. The sun is high in the sky above you. Soon."
This creeped me the hell out the first time I heard it. It raised so many questions. Who was this for? Did they pacify patients with this drivel? Why do the rooms look so goddamn unnerving? It's something that stuck with me because you don't find something else like it again in the game. We also find this log reference in it. It reads, "Morley, I just found a patient who's been locked in a recovery room for days, listening to that god-awful bullshit about pretty sunrises and a wife back home frying bacon. We have been requested to vacate the premises in readiness for the decommission, but we have not been given leave to abandon our duty of care. Don't let this happen again." If you remember, the one who left the patient alone was Kuhlman, and the poor patient was stuck listening to those recordings over and over again. This place is actually mentioned in an interview with one of the writers, Will Porter, and he had this to say. Take our psychiatric facility in San Cristobal Medical, for example. A lot of it is flavor, of course, most of my job is, but rather than take the standard video game trope of the gore-dripped madhouse, we could take Alien's realism and use it to flag interesting concepts. Say, for example, the fact that the human mind isn't built for the vastness of space, or even prolonged removal from the natural rhythms of Earth. Mix this in with a touch of what we'd now recognize as the 1970s misapprehensions in mental health treatment through signage and language, and all of a sudden, you've got a space to explore that feels subtly different to where most games have gone before. This is of course true, but I very much believe that much of my work is for the player to absorb quite ambiently, as they scan through terminals and half listen to announcements. It's a framing device that influences mood and expectation, and complements what one would hope is the cold dread of the gameplay proper. The incredible thing is, it completely worked. This facility and the countless other set pieces whose sole purpose is to cultivate this atmosphere of dread and isolation work together perfectly. Combine that with the high quality graphics and sound design and you have a very believable and terrifying environment, one which will evoke all the necessary emotions of fear and horror, despite the player not consciously absorbing every little facet of it. This is what primarily hooks me to this game, the indelible atmosphere it provides. Queen on Sevastopol. In some areas around Sevastopol, you can hear this eerie shriek. The problem is, to some, this sounds like the shrieks of a much larger, formidable alien, the Queen. I personally never noticed these screams, I just attributed them to the normal drones, but they do sound distinct. I managed to get access to the game files, and after listening to all the alien sound effects, it seems like these sounds are very similar to the normal attack noises. There are also these backstage sound effects that I assume play in the hive, and could be attributed to the Queen. It's not definitive, but I think it's more where these sounds play that bring up ideas of the Queen, rather than their quality, since it's both unexpected in Gemini Solutions and expected in the hive. But that could also be just confirmation bias. All that aside, we do have actual confirmation from the devs themselves that there is indeed a Queen on Sevastopol, and those sounds are most likely intentional, so maybe I just didn't look hard enough, who knows. Now, for the reason as to why we don't see her at all in the game, or more obvious hints towards her existence, is to not give the player the expectation of a boss fight, since that would go against the feel of the game. It was also to stay true to their focus on the original Alien movie, as that one didn't have a queen and possibly relied on different means of reproduction. Having the queen be hidden from the player was a really smart decision. For attentive players, it gives you yet another reason to be terrified, and it also has this almost eldritch feel to it, like this monster that's hiding deep in the heart of the station, furthering the race of these virtually invincible creatures. It's almost as if you should count yourself lucky for not coming across her. Handgun tremble. If you hold your revolver, you can see that Ripley's hand trembles slightly. Now, this could be attributed to just normal sway, not everyone holds guns perfectly still, I assume, but it could also be chalked up to her being inexperienced with them, since she's an engineer and wouldn't have had to engage in combat very often. A nice little detail that gives her just a bit more character. The art book. There's an art book for this game that has quite a lot of worthwhile stuff to check out. Concept art, artist's insight, alternative looks for the areas. It's a really good read if you want to see some more behind the scenes of the game's development. I'm not going to cover it page by page here, of course, but there are some things I'd like to mention. First is that the environments we see in this book don't really match up with what we get in the final game. These are more grandiose and elaborate. It almost looks like a different game in that regard, and the color schemes are all different, and reminds me somewhat of Soma, another horror game I covered on this channel. The alien isolation we got is more grounded, and while I would have loved to see the designs in the art book to come to fruition, I think what we got is all around a better choice. These hive designs do look sick though. Imagine exploring this gigantic chamber. It being so large the ceiling is not even in view. Would have been magnificent. You also have this area, and while it is in the final game, it looks completely different, and instead of sacks filled with synthetics white blood, it looks more like those doors from that one scene in Monsters Inc. It does spill something when you shoot it though, so at least that detail survived. Moreover, we even have a mention of the alien queen in this book, strangely enough, with this image. I could not decipher for the life of me what this says, so if you can figure it out, let me know in the comments. One redditor by the name of Whiplash Dynamo thinks it's maybe egg sackish under alien queen, and that it sort of resembles the queen's crest-shaped head. I can sort of see the latter. The black rendering looks somewhat similar. Lastly, we have a note on Apollo and its design, where the mix of geometrical and organic shapes is highlighted. A mess of wires coming out of a perfect sphere. This, combined with a little window on its side, resembles an eye with nerves, the artist's intention. I guess this further proves that almost everything in this game is done purposefully, which makes analyzing it just that more rewarding. I mentioned Soma in this entry, and coincidentally, the Apollo design is similar to the WoW's, shown here. The Apollo is not really as twisted as the WoW as we find it in-game, but it just shows how prevalent this eye design is. Pretty cool. Ricardo caused the explosion. In the events of the DLC, as well as in this log we find in the game, we learn that Ricardo was the one responsible for the explosion that threw us off course during the spacewalk at the start of the game, in an attempt to kill the alien. You actually get to play the sequence yourself, placing the explosions and everything. It of course makes sense that they would eventually explain what caused the explosion, but for my mind, which tends to take some stuff for granted that it really shouldn't, it came off as a surprise that it all ties well together. Alien Blackout. After the release of Alien Isolation, a sequel to the game was hinted at, and people were hyped. So hyped in fact that when the game turned out to be a mobile one that didn't follow the previous title's formula, they were disappointed, and rightfully so. Now I haven't played the game myself, but from the gameplay that I've seen on YouTube, it seems fun in its own right. It's a nice take on the FNAF formula, where you have to guide survivors and protect them while making sure you're not killed yourself. It also expands on the lore of the Alien universe, albeit in a minuscule way. So, Alien Blackout picks up sometime after the end of Alien Isolation, in the Mendel Research Station, owned by Weyland-Yutani. It's not clear how much time has passed between the events of Isolation and this game, and when we find Amanda, she has just woken up to find everyone who brought her aboard the station dead. Another ship then arrives, and it's Amanda's responsibility to keep herself and the crew safe. The one notable thing about this game's lore is that the xenomorph we find aboard the station was born there, according to Amanda, and that she blames Weyland-Yutani for it. This is the first incident of something like this happening, where the alien we encounter came from someplace other than LV-426, implying that there is another source for the creatures that the company has discovered between alien and aliens. One theory is that there have always been other places the xenomorphs came from. It's just that everyone who encountered them never lived long enough to tell the tale. After you beat the game, you get this cutscene.
This is Amanda Ripley, reporting from courier ship Halden. The Mendel Research Station has been destroyed. The crew is dead. We are on course for the KOI-125.01 manufacturing colony. With me is the crew of the Halden, Captain Sato and Engineer Stedwick.
Well, acting captain. But hey, I'll take it.
As well as the passengers, Executive Director Yutani, and the research scientist Thorncroft.
Engineer Ripley should be commended for her actions.
We should reach the colony in 3 days. From there, it is my intention to continue to Earth. This is Amanda Ripley, signing off.
In my opinion, Alien Blackout doesn't do Alien Isolation justice. Far from it. While it could be fun, the story is lackluster and a far cry from the experience we got in Isolation. They should have pooled more resources to make a proper sequel, as the genre still had more potential. Alien Isolation fans are still waiting for a sequel, some 10 years later, and with the release of Alien Romulus, I hope that gets someone at some board to click their fingers and get the ball rolling. So the part that you just heard now is obviously written before the announcement, and I'm just super ecstatic that the game is actually getting released. When I first saw the announcement, I thought it was some sort of troll, some sort of like fake leak, but no, we're actually getting Alien Isolation 2. This is amazing. Anyways, back to the video. Accidental pun or intentional joke. This entry is just something funny I've noticed while researching. In a part of the game where you're detached from the station and lose gravity for a moment, the gravity stabilizers kick in, and you're told this. Stand by. Yeah, sure. Now this pun could be just a happy little accident, but with this game, I'm inclined to think it's intentional. And if so, then it's out of this world. For those who didn't get it, the thing said stand, but you can't stand because there's no gravity. So it's a joke based on how you're floating, and it's you get it. That's why it's funny, right? Moving on. What happened to Amanda after Alien Isolation? The end of Alien Isolation left me a bit disappointed. It's not that I find it bad, I just expected something more bombastic, and definitely not a cliffhanger. That aside, we can actually see an extended cut of this ending in the exclusive digital series posted on IGN, where after she ejects herself and the alien, a number of xenomorphs are seen clutching onto the debris, seemingly in hibernation. Maneuvering around them and using her thrusters, she reaches the beacon and transmits a message, telling everyone on the other end that she's alive and is waiting for rescue. Following this, we of course have the events of Alien Blackout, which we just discussed. But what's after that? Well, I'm sorry to inform you, but it's just a whole mess of plot and lore. Basically, there's this comic series that has Amanda Ripley reunite with her friend Zula Hendricks, that she worked with for a total of 1 week on Luna, the moon, and they go and do wacky shit together. I saw this video that goes over the story, and I personally didn't find it interesting at all. It seemed all against the entire spirit of the game, and not in a good way like Aliens, although that could just be bias given that it's in a different medium than the game. There is a video linked in the description if you'd like to watch it, but I think that the comics and novels are third tier canon anyways, meaning they can get retconned by a future movie or game, so there's that. Now comes the interesting part. Is Amanda still alive? At first, this seems like a dumb question. It's confirmed in the director's cut of Aliens that she died on December 23, 2178, at the age of 66 from cancer, having been married and with no children. But there is just one hitch. The person who tells us this info is the extremely untrustworthy Burke. Alistair Hope from Creative Assembly sums this up pretty well. If there's one thing we know about Burke, it's that he's an extremely untrustworthy character. The one thing he needs to do is get Ripley to go back to LV-426, and there's a chance he's going to tell her whatever he thinks he needs to say. The plot thickens further, however, and Amanda is actually confirmed to be alive, with an asterisk, in the 2022 novel Alien Colony War. Her death is in fact a cover-up story put forward to hide the fact that she had actually gone into cryosleep until a cure for her cancer could be found. Crazy, I know. So she's confirmed to be alive as far as 2186, the year the book is set in. What happens to her afterwards is unconfirmed, but one can hope that Amanda was cured and lived the rest of her life with her husband. What baffles me with this whole ordeal is just how many damn books, comics, and other media is in the Alien franchise. I mean, just looking at the stuff set after Alien Isolation, it's an exorbitant amount. In my opinion, it clutters the canon a bit, but I guess there's always the option of retconning. Alien Isolation comic. Speaking of comics, there exists a single-issue tie-in Alien Isolation comic that's a prequel to the game, covering 3 stories that happened before Ripley's arrival in Sevastopol. It was written by Dan Abnett and Dion Lay, I hope I pronounced those properly, who both worked on the game, and the stories themselves are quite a good read. The first one, Pins, depicts the alien picking off what was left of Marshall Waits' crew, leaving him as the sole survivor. A Decent Man is about Clark and his accidental shooting of survivor Ross, which, while not killing him as he initially thought, attracts the alien which finishes the job. The last one, A Warm Place, details Meeks, one of the crew members that was on the Unisadora, and his nightmare sequence that he experienced while a facehugger was attached to his face. The comic ends with Waits being confronted by an android called Chuck. Chuck informs Waits that he's trespassing, to which Waits responds by shooting him, which destroys it. Waits then walks away, muttering, "Damn androids," to himself. As said before, it's a good read, with beautiful art and a solid story, and not as offensive as the other plethora of Alien comics, just a simple tie-in showing off more of the chaos at Sevastopol. Useless utilities. You do a lot of button pressing, lever pulling, and code punching in this game. It adds to the immersion in my opinion, especially since the animations are so well done. However, not all of these methods serve a purpose, and more than once you can find useless switches that are just for show, or doors and trapdoors that were never meant to be unlocked. The one that stood out for me was this switch here in Mission 7, in the area where the alien snatches one of the survivors into the floor below. As far as I know, you can't interact with it at all, which is strange given that all other instances of this switch are interactable. Perhaps it was meant to have a use, but was hastily cut without removing the model itself. Another example courtesy of the channel Slippy Slides is this door near the ambulance shuttle, where similar to the previous one, it has a handle that's used throughout the game to open doors, but in this case it's non-interactable. What's even stranger, however, is that there's an item that can be collected behind the door, so it's most probably a case of cut content. Another dubious door you discover is this one marked with a red X. It's supposed to imply that whatever is behind that door is too dangerous for any mortal being to observe, which might be a possible explanation for why there's nothing behind it, if you know clip through the geometry. Jokes aside, this is the only example of a red X in the game that I could find. It makes you wonder what its story was. My bets is on someone seeing the alien there, quickly locking the door, and bravely marking it with an X to warn any future passerbys. We also have 3 things that just don't do anything in the game. First is this code that's outright mentioned in a terminal in Gemini Exoplanet Solutions, which doesn't unlock anything. Again, probably cut from the game, and it was accidentally left. Another is the previously mentioned 1979 code, just an Easter egg. And finally, which I find the funniest, is this unstable system node you find in the circuit breaker thingamajig, that literally don't do anything, like in the game code. I think they're just placeholders for you to take power from them. There are probably more examples that I missed, since this game is huge, and even the ones that I did mention could allude to something bigger. If anyone knows some more pointless peripherals, feel free to write it down in the comments below. Amanda Ripley's backstory. Amanda has somewhat of a backstory. The little of it you get in the game boils down to her having lost her mother in the Nostromo, and that she's been looking for her ever since. The novelization adds to this, and we learn that, in addition to her mother's disappearance, she actually had less than an ideal childhood. Ellen Ripley, Amanda's mother, remarried to a Paul Carter after her ex-husband Alex abandoned her. The relationship was largely loveless, and while Ellen was the one providing for the family, Paul was busy being an alcoholic, struggling to keep a job, and getting into arguments with his wife, which affected Amanda greatly. Fast forward to Amanda's teenage years, where, still looking for any signs of her mother, stole some money from her stepfather to pay for leaked info from the Nostromo, something which turned out to be a scam. Following this, a lot of fights ensued between her and her stepfather, which led her to run away, multiple times, and on her 18th birthday, broke off contact with Paul and led her own life, becoming the engineer we know today. I honestly didn't expect this angle of Amanda's childhood that the novel showed, although it does make sense in hindsight. Ellen had to provide for her family, and in a world where job opportunities are scarce, she had to accept any offers, even ones that leave her estranged from her husband and child for years at a time. Her new husband also harbored disdain for her, for this exact reason. Her 2-year journey to Thetis took a toll on him, and while this doesn't excuse his alcoholism and other behavior, it has certainly exacerbated it. Amanda losing her mother, after being promised that she would return on her 11th birthday, was enough tragic backstory for me, but this one painted in the novel helps you understand her determination even more. Her mother was the only solace she had in her life, and Mr. Greatly will live in alone with Carter. It only makes sense that she'd continue to search for her, along with any inkling that might allude to her fate. It's quite tragic that, as far as we know, they never reunite, as that's the story presented on the surface level with aliens and alien isolation. It still makes you wonder if they would have done something else with it, because as realistic and gut-wrenching as this outcome is, it still left me empty and dissatisfied, but maybe that was the entire point. The birthday curse. If I had a nickel for every time a parent promises their child that they're going to be with them on their birthday in the alien universe, but not going through with that promise, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. We all know what that first one was, when Ellen Ripley missed the birthday of her daughter Amanda, but we also have the case of the aforementioned Mike Tanaka missing the birthday of his 2 daughters, Heidi and Beth, as shown in this tweet. Got your latest transmission, Heidi and Beth? Don't worry, I'll definitely be home in time for your birthdays. Yes, with the gifts. It's a gut-wrenching trope to use, which makes more sense why the devs employed it a second time. Poor guys. The walls are covered with black tar. Bulbous eggs are strewn about the floor. Screeches can be heard from every direction, and your motion tracker is going mad. We have reached the abyss. Egg morphing. Egg morphing is the process of a xenomorph using a victim's body as a base for creating an egg, or an ovomorph as it's otherwise called. The body itself doesn't turn into an egg, but rather acts as a source of nutrients for its development. This is according to the novelization of Alien, along with quotes from Ridley Scott. Now, this is largely removed from the franchise's canon, with one notable exception I'll mention later, but fans of the franchise still like to theorize about its existence. As for what this has to do with alien isolation, well, the devs as previously mentioned have confirmed that there is indeed a queen on Sevastopol. This doesn't however exclude the possibility of egg morphing being in effect. The only times when egg morphing is showed in the Alien franchise is in the director's cut of Alien and in Alien 3. The latter includes a necromorph, a mutant variant of the alien that is able to egg morph. You could argue that this ability is restricted purely to that variant, and the ordinary xenomorphs don't possess it. What I think is that it's possible that the alien, after bursting out of Foster's chest, either became a queen through some mechanism that allows a drone to transform into one when needed, or the drone used egg morphing to create a queen. It could be that egg morphing is the only way to create one, but that wouldn't explain why we see two examples of egg morphing side by side in Alien, as making more than one queen wouldn't really make much sense. There isn't really anything for this theory to stand on, but I think that if there were a queen on the station, she must have come from somewhere, and it would be fitting for the aliens to have two methods of reproduction, so as to make absolutely sure that their race continues, no matter the conditions. One last tidbit is that in the novelization of Alien 3, it stated that both forms of reproduction are exhibited by the species, and that either can be used depending on the station, so it seems like it's more or less confirmed, but still, take it with a grain of salt. The posters have subliminal meaning. There are a lot of posters in the game, 140 to be exact. Some of them are different orientations of each other, but the rest are all unique. Now, I could spend the next hour carefully analyzing every single piece of symbolism present in these posters, but I won't, mainly because I haven't gone insane yet, and besides, a fantastic video by Collative Learning already exists that covers some of the more prominent symbolism, a channel which I highly recommend if you're into Alien Isolation, or Alien as a whole, as it has a lot of great content pertaining to that. I will however go over the highlights that I couldn't find in that video, which I'll list in no particular order. First is this little blurb in the art book, which I'll just read in full. Background details such as these advertisements are easily overlooked during fraught moments of gameplay, but imagine how much more desolate Sevastopol Station would look without them. Hundreds of individual images were created to support and enhance the story and the universe we had created, explains Bradley White. These posters reference print material published in the 1970s, using ideas, styles, and colors that would have been commonplace. They were just pure fun to create and let loose on. The key line here is created to support and enhance the story and the universe we had created. So these posters weren't created willy-nilly, but serve a thematic purpose as well as a storytelling one, something that's pretty obvious when you view them. But one must remember this when analyzing the posters whose message is more on the vague side. You just need to look a little bit closer. One common theme across these posters is just how comically terrifying the working Joes look. It's almost as if Seegson was trying to make them as horrifying as possible, but in reality they're just incompetent, greedy assholes. It's hard to believe that a company would give the okay to designs and posters such as these, which are, I assume, supposed to paint the androids in a positive light, but instead just make them seem like sinister synthetics. The game also piles on the irony with the "you're in safe hands when you're with a working Joe" spiel, when in actuality their hands are anything but. There's also a lot of intentional contrast in these posters. Take a look at this one for example. You have in the foreground a classic romantic date night, and in the back a working Joe loading baggage in a bleak background. It's a really unsettling juxtaposition, almost as if the couple are ignoring whatever happens around them and they're putting on a smile to stay sane. On the more extreme spectrum, we have whatever the hell this is. It's either a movie poster or a concert advertisement, but either way, I think its purpose is to just instill fear in the players if they come across it. A random creepy face cropping up somewhere is pretty effective after all. This one's pretty on the nose, I think, and is just mocking either the player or a Seegson employee for coming to Sevastopol. If you could go back, what would you change? A whole lot, I presume, given that whoever's reading this at this point is under constant threat of death. Even taking the mortal danger out of the equation, I don't think working in Sevastopol would have been as sunshine and rainbows as it's advertised to be, so it's a jab at those people as well. This one's actually in the video I mentioned earlier, but I thought I'd include it here just because it's really cool. The main takeaway here is the "good as food" tagline, which is pretty similar to another commonly said phrase, "good as dead." Here we have this enigmatic poster. There are a lot of things working together here actually. You have the deformed Earth being the highlight of the image, along with the astronaut, his hand on the telephone as if he's going to make a call, and the stars and moon surrounding him, which, upon closer inspection, are, along with the Earth, being hung from wires, as if it's all in a stage. This could maybe reference the Shakespearean line, "all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players," and that the astronaut is trying to reach out for a fake world, one that's being held up with strings, deformed and out of reach. And finally, we have this. This one's a riot. First, we have the mention of isolation. Oh my god, that's the name of the game, crazy. And the "don't suffer alone" part, possibly alluding to the fact that while you are isolated from help, you're never truly alone, as the alien is always hunting you, basking in your suffering. The cherry on top, however, is the hotline box having the same name repeated 6 times, along with what I expect to be just complete gibberish. We also have another instance of a similar poster. I wonder what the devs were thinking with placing all these random strings of letters here. Did they serve a purpose? Did they just get lazy and decided to match their keyboards to fill space? Or does it serve another purpose entirely? Who knows? Deleted alien scene in DLC. In one of the DLCs, Crew Expendable, you play through an alternate version of the Alien movie's events, where you and the rest of the crew attempt to trap the alien in an airlock and eject it. The final part of the DLC goes like this. If you've watched the movie, you'll know that this lovely gentleman here was the reason the plan didn't succeed, as he had ulterior motives. He set off an alarm that scared the creature away, knocking you down in the process. I really enjoyed this part in the game, because it's yet another way to show Ash's malice, and it being a moment where the crew got so close to ridding themselves of the xenomorph for good, but failing because they didn't realize there was another, more insidious threat on board. Now, this entire sequence was actually a cutscene from the original Alien, where the same events happen, albeit with some differences. In the game, I used the flare to lure the alien in the airlock, but in the movie, as well as the novelization, the alien is mesmerized by a green light, and enters the airlock to investigate. Yes, that same green light mentioned earlier. The airlock is then opened to Justice and the alien, but just as Ripley shuts the inner door and opens the outer one, an alarm sounds and scares the creature away. And as the inner door closes, its arm gets caught in and subsequently severed. There is more to this scene, but that's the extent of what's present in the game, minus the severed arm. I really like this practice of putting cut scenes into an adaptation, along with adapting the game faithfully. You also breathe life into the scenes that didn't make it, so fans of the series can enjoy them nonetheless. Working Joes have emotions? Smythe, the chap who was killed by an android stuffing a magazine down his throat, wrote this message shortly before dying. It reads,
"What do you mean you shut the access door to the elevator? All your guns and supplies mean jack shit to me when the synthetic that was chasing you is still f***ing down here. I don't think it's seen me. It's just staring at your old magazines in the blood paint overlook. Get back down here and open this door now."
The thing that jumped at me here is that the android was staring at the magazines. This mimics Ash's momentary look at the mags in Alien, but also suggests that something similar was going on through the Working Joe's mind. The reason Ash used the magazine is theorized to be because he was compensating for something, given that he's a synthetic. It really makes you think, because why would the company create androids and then add a sensor for dealing with complex human emotions? Sounds absolutely deranged. That, or it was an emergent property as a result of the advanced programming. To be honest, I mainly think this discussion mostly applies to Ash, because we're shown time and time again that the Working Joes are not really that advanced, and these little hints we get in the game are merely homages that inadvertently make the androids in the game seem more sophisticated. I do think that it's absolutely terrifying, and that's why we shouldn't touch sentient AI with a 10-foot stick until we've studied every possible way it can malfunction. Even then, who knows what sort of emergent behavior could arise that we didn't predict, and by then we're left with magazine stuffing androids. Alien Isolation was previously third person. Originally, Alien Isolation was going to be third person, with cover mechanics and everything. The third person demo was an early prototype, and was of course scrapped for the first person perspective. Personally, I'm so glad they ditched third person and went with what we have in the game instead. The former would have just invited comparisons between it and Dead Space, and for me, horror games function much better when viewed from the eyes of the character, as that allows you to experience it at a much visceral level. It's much more immersive, and the leaning mechanics in Alien Isolation were pretty successful in what they did. Use them to check behind cover, while in third person, that would simply be solved by the nature of the camera itself, allowing you to see what your character shouldn't be able to, for gameplay purposes. Moreover, you would have been able to see the alien way more often with a third person view, which would have robbed it of its mystique much earlier. At the end of Isolation, I found myself just playing cat and mouse with the alien, but at the start, I was always terrified of it spotting me, or just as terrifying, me spotting it. Since you're mostly behind cover and just use the motion tracker to avoid it, the rare times you do get to see it in all of its glory are chilling. I guess the developers realized this as well, hence the final state of the game. But I still have this irrational fear that they would have gone with third person in a parallel universe, and a lot of the game's magic would have been lost. Who let the Anisador in? Waits, right? I mean, the game literally spells it out for us with this log. But when you look at it harder, it's not as straightforward. I'll let the log play.
Anisadora, this is Marshal Waits of Sevastopol. Officially, I should deny your request to dock. Sevastopol is currently being decommissioned, and I can't compromise security for unscheduled vessels. However, in the light of the property you found, I will allow a small number of your crew to dock via a short-range shuttle. I must remind you that Sevastopol is entitled to a cut of any reward for return of said property once it's on station. Let me know your decision. Waits out.
So Waits actively ignores security protocols and lets them in, just to get a cut of their reward money from delivering the Nostromo black box. The thing that sort of conflicts with the whole Waits let them in idea is this log by Lingard. It states,
Waits, it's Dr. Lingard. I've just examined a patient with, well, I've never seen anything like it. It's some kind of unknown parasite. I did a quick check on the name they gave me, and there's no one registered under it at Sevastopol. I think she came on board recently. Do you know anything about this? I have no idea what Sinclair and his men were doing, but this should have been picked up during quarantine. Who knows what else they've let through? The patient and her captain are waiting for me in the examination room. Get down here now.
We know two things from this log. One is that Lingard blames Sinclair for not catching the infestation in quarantine, and two is that Sinclair and his team are responsible for enforcing said quarantine and its procedures. So there are two possibilities here as to what happened. First is that, yes, Waits let the Anisadora in, but only some of its crew members, and he expected Sinclair to go through with the usual quarantine procedures. He however did not, and was either lenient with them, which is unlikely, or was bribed with Marlowe, or some other member, possibly with a cut of their reward. I'd like to think that if a bribery did occur, it was done by Marlowe, since he knew that there was something amiss with his wife, but wanted her to get medical attention at any cost, and so bribed Sinclair. This would explain why she wasn't quarantined, and why Waits assumed that she was clear to go. The second possibility is that Waits was informed that Foster was sick, but ordered Sinclair to let her through anyways. We know that Waits is at the top of the command chain, and is within his rights to do this, given that he offers to drop his investigation into Sinclair's involvement in unregistered black market trading, implying a source of power over him, and this theory would exempt Sinclair from being directly involved in the infestation. Personally, I think both are equally plausible. Waits is clearly stated to be the sort of person who, when it comes to certain situations, can disregard the general safety procedures. Maybe he wised up and realized there's nothing for him at Sevastopol, and saw that this was his chance for him to make a quick buck before the decommission ends. Maybe he also expected the quarantine procedures to be carried out properly, or maybe he himself said to hell with them, and let them in anyways. One can't be sure. What is certain, however, is that greed was part of Sevastopol's downfall. If Jethro Waits or Sinclair, whoever was actually responsible for the xenomorph setting foot on the station, maybe took a page from Ellen Ripley's book and stuck with the procedures, the massacre would have been avoided. Of course, Marlowe came to Sevastopol to save his wife, and they landed on LV-426 as part of their job, but greed was the straw that broke the camel's back and led Sevastopol to ruin. The walls are covered with fire, the station rumbles, and the screeches of the aliens grow ever louder. Sevastopol is slowly sinking, soon to be engulfed by a giant. Only one light remains, and oh, is it a dim one. The bottom of the ocean awaits. Alternate ending. There's this storyboard of the original ending of the game that depicts a more, let's say, bleak fate for Ripley. Like the game, a pack of xenomorphs is chasing her, and she manages to open a hatch of sorts that lets her disconnect the Torrens from Sevastopol. However, in this version, she is not tethered to the Torrens and is flung into space. In one frame, she comes really close to one of the aliens, but floats away, attempting to clutch a piece of metal, but falling. We then get a shot of Sevastopol, sinking into the gas giant, and the Torrens flying off to escape the planet's gravitational pull. Verlaine attempts to contact Ripley, but receives no response. Another shot of Sevastopol being fully engulfed, and one last look at Ripley, stranded in space, seemingly unconscious. So in this version, that entire sequence with Ripley boarding the Torrens and finding the alien already aboard is cut, meaning Verlaine and Connor survive. Of course, it can't be a video game Iceberg without the obligatory "it was all a dream" theory, and the wiki mentions something similar, citing certain fan theories that propose that the game's ending was in fact a dream, and she never set foot on the Torrens, citing as evidence the Torrens' unlikelihood of escaping the fallen Sevastopol if the crew was already killed, and that the final section of the gameplay possesses a certain dreamlike quality. Yeah, it's as far a stretch as can be, but then again, these "it was all a dream" theories are most of the time just jokes. The ending we got is more or less a cliffhanger, which, while I find anticlimactic, certainly invites ideas for a sequel. Cut content. As with all games, especially AAA ones, there's a lot of cut content surrounding Alien Isolation, from minor stuff like cut lines, UI, archive logs, to game mechanics and entire sections of the game, along with the massive story rewrite that happened around a year before release. I'm not going to cover every single cut thing in the game, or else Sevastopol will crash before I'm done, but I will mention the most interesting stuff, in no particular order. As mentioned, there are quite a few cut audio logs, 9 of them to be exact, but they all sound a bit off and don't fit with the rest of the ones you find. I'm glad they were cut. The voice acting in this game is really good, and Ripley's voice actress really impressed me with one of her lines. These left out logs are all mediocre in comparison. Speaking of voice acting, there's a lot of cut dialogue in the game, which has been recorded and everything and still lies in the game files. There's this fantastic video by Galaxy Traveler that compiles them all into one continuous experience, so I recommend to watch that if you'd like to check all of them out. But from what I've listened to, all of the lines were cut for a reason. But there are ones that I would have liked to see in the game, or modified and put in. One such line comes from the hostile groups you meet around the station, that gives insight into their situation and their leader Sinclair, as well as the lines that further characterize Amanda, either by dialogue or whimpering and screaming in certain circumstances. There was going to be a multiplayer mode for the game. It would have been a 1 to 4 player co-op, which from what I've read could have functioned as sort of a Dead by Daylight experience, where one takes the role of the alien and the others are survivors, since there is code for a controllable alien in the game files. This could have also been just a co-op mode where you and your friends try to survive from the same AI-driven alien, or it was just intended as a way for the devs to playtest said alien. I'm not really sure how I feel about this mode. I think if done correctly, it would have been fun to grab a couple of your friends and roleplay any of the Alien movies, but I feel like it would have taken away from the main game's resources, and we would have gotten a poorer product because of that. Some other miscellaneous features: there was going to be a messaging system, akin to the one present in Dark Souls and other Souls games, called Memento Mori, which is a Latin phrase aptly meaning, "remember, you must die," where you can leave a message for other players to read, and it could be turned on and off while playing. A new Game Plus mode was in the works, until it was cut, and we don't really know much about it other than it existed at some point. There were going to be actual arcade games, while not being playable would have at least been shown. In the final game, if you go to the arcade in Mission 2, you're met with broken machines that just display some errors, but it was planned for 3 arcade games to be available, titled Dragon Gauntlet, Power Up, Dinky Kong, and Super Mario. The latter 2 are obviously parodies of Donkey Kong and Super Mario, and I'm glad those weren't included, because I mean, all the companies we've seen in the game were original, and these references would have seemed weird, given that it's the same universe and implies these are either bootleg copies or the actual games, and the latter is much less unique in my opinion. In any case, I would have still liked to see some games flickering on and off in one of the arcade machines, just to highlight the fact that nobody's there to play them anymore. Originally, you were meant to be able to craft weapons in the game, jerry-rigging them from materials you find lying about the station, but this was later removed and delegated to just the items, like the noisemaker and the smoke bomb. In the art book, you can find a lot of illustrations for these impromptu weapons, whose design survived with the bolt gun, a massively powerful gun in the final game with a long wind-up period. There was also an SMG that was removed late into development. To be honest, I think the amount of stuff that you could craft/use in the game was on the edge of being too much. When you're deep into the game and have collected everything, if you open your radial menu, you're bombarded with so many options. I guess this allows the player to experiment as much as possible, but yeah, I just found it interesting. I kept thinking, how many more items am I gonna get? And little did I know, I completely missed the pipe bomb, so the final menu looks even more cluttered. The Working Joes also had aspects that were cut/changed in the final game, as they originally looked more humanoid, with faces that could actually pass off as human, unlike the monstrosities we got. You can see them in old versions of some posters. There were also some iterations made on the final Android model, with hair and a baseball cap being experimented with. And yeah, you can judge for yourself, they look more ridiculous than menacing. One of the less consequential cuts is this Sonic the Hedgehog keychain that was hanging from Ripley's backpack. I'm not really sure why they removed this. It's a cute detail that would have made us relate to Amanda just a tiny bit more. Maybe they removed it because of licensing issues? Or Sonic just doesn't exist anymore in 2137? If so, rest in peace Sonic, you had a good run. In the main menu, you can find this Extras tab, and I was excited to see what sort of little behind the scenes and concept art this promising section would hold, but alas, only the game's credits are here, which was disappointing. And didn't really make sense, as why would there be an entire tab dedicated for just the credits? Well, it was originally meant to have several other sections, like an image gallery, dev diaries, achievements and progress. In the dev diaries section, you would have been able to view a making of Alien Isolation, deleted scenes and CG trailer. I'm not sure why it was removed. I never even added again 10 years later. Maybe they were just too lazy to put the actual files there. I'm honestly out of answers. There was a scrapped VR mode that was supposed to be shipped with the game, and there are still files that have some of that functionality, specifically support for the Oculus DK1. It's unknown why it was scrapped, but the wiki posits that it was either a financial concern, as in Sega refusing to fund the extra development time, or a technical issue, and they didn't want to go through the hassle of reworking everything. But fret not, VR enjoyers, because there is a working VR mod for Alien Isolation that, as far as I know, functions without any major issues. I even found this lovely comment while looking for VR related posts, and it's pretty nice that this game spoke to as many people as it did. If you've noticed already, there is so much work that goes into these games that's just scrapped. It's almost inevitable. You just don't know what's gonna happen in the development process that'll turn everything on its head. A game I recently covered, Soma, went through a similar thing, where the game was written up to its end, and many systems were already in place, yet it was scrapped and massively changed. Alien Isolation also went through a massive rewrite, as previously mentioned, where originally the game had a whopping 34 chapters, as opposed to the 19 we currently have. And I'm glad this change was made, because when I was playing, I felt the game was going on a touch too long, so 15 more chapters might have been a bit too excessive. Anyways, there are a couple of interesting things from this earlier script that I'll go over. Some of the stuff that was scrapped was recycled into final game content. For example, the fully fledged chapters were turned into mere archive logs. And there was this entire ship that got reworked into the Anisadora, a medical vessel called the Solace. The Solace was a ship cut from the game that you were meant to come across before entering Sevastopol. It was eventually removed because of pacing issues, but what's left of it in the concept art and the game files is really interesting. The Torns would be alerted to its presence, and when Ripley boards it, she discovers it frozen over, with ice lining the walls and the corpses of those who attempted to escape aboard it still in their glass coffins, as the game calls them. I would have loved to go through this area. It looks really pretty from the concept art and would have been an eerie environment to explore. This was an attempt made by desperate survivors trying to escape the xenomorph infestation on Sevastopol, only to end up stranded and with insufficient resources, being slowly picked off by another alien that was on the ship. It was like sliding from one death trap into the other. The Solace didn't reflect its name all that well, sadly. I think that the pacing of the final game suits it better. A slow burn leading into the disaster on board. It's much better suited for horror than an immediate plunge into action, and makes the initial reveal that much more impactful. Some other story beats that I found interesting are Ripley actually siding with Marlowe and agreeing to help him blow up Sevastopol, seeing as the xenomorphs will have already killed everyone by then. They would have then escaped aboard the Torrens before the detonation, and taken with them any survivors. This wouldn't end up being the case though, as Marlowe and Ricardo are still slated to die. A moral choice between having Ripley execute an infected survivor or letting Marlowe do it, and him saying afterwards, "It's better this way, I've seen what happens." The scene made me realize that there are no choices in this game whatsoever, significant or otherwise. It's not that type of game of course, but a little moral dilemma here and there wouldn't hurt anyone. There is this achievement called Mercy or Prudence that you get when you beat the game without killing any humans, but that doesn't really count in my opinion. Ripley encountering the Hive for a second time, and it being larger, since the xenomorphs would have expanded it between her two visits. As I mentioned in the art book, this is probably where those depictions of the Hive would have taken place. And finally, this jarring cut tidbit I found while researching, which is that for the longest time, Amanda was actually an android, and she was going to be revealed as such at the end of the game, as a sort of twist ending. According to the wiki, the developers made her an android to provide a plausible explanation as to why she goes searching for her mother, because a real human would not be as inclined as a programmed android, which does not make an inkling of sense to me. I mean, they realized that as well and changed it, but the simple fact that she didn't get closure and would go to any means to get it is enough motive for me. I guess as they continued fleshing out her character, it just made more sense to have her as an actual human, and the android idea was scrapped. Alright, this was quite a long entry, simply because of the amount of stuff that was cut, but we can finally move on now. Release the Kraken. In Mission 16, you come across a terminal that can open a door to free a so-called Super Working Joe, one that is more powerful and not susceptible to EMP blasts or the shocky stick. This android can swiftly deal with the hostile humans in the area, which is appropriately dubbed the Kraken by the Alien Isolation speedrunning community. The key to releasing this beast from its eternal imprisonment is seemingly missing in Mission 4, which is the same area that you explore in Mission 16. I wonder if this is a development oversight, which, let's be honest, that's probably the case, or did somebody just haul that giant-ass terminal to that exact spot for some reason instead of fending for his life, or gathering resources and whatnot. Or perhaps he was forced to do it as an order for some higher-up. Although I think that system of hierarchy was probably long gone by the time we've arrived onto Sevastopol. Or maybe he also wanted to release the Kraken. Who knows? When I went back through Mission 4, I found that the Kraken is also not present in this section, so somebody probably did lock him in using the terminal as the key. Strange antics indeed. One thing to note is that there is a key card here that can be found before you see the terminal in Mission 16, belonging to a P. Brophy. I thought that this would explain who this body is that we find when we unlock the room, but that remains a mystery. Or does it? A theory that I just thought of while writing is that this person, upon realizing the danger of the xenomorph, somehow dragged the Super Joe along with him into this room, and locked it from the inside, with the android acting as protection. The terminal outside was also set by him as a way for the room to be openable somehow, which, yeah, that part is a bit iffy, but who knows. The Super Joe then went ballistic after the orders to murder everyone came from Apollo, and he was subsequently killed. This could be the story that the devs were trying to show with the android being stuck with a body, or not, and I'm looking too much into things. If there is one thing we've learned from this video, is that both are equally possible. The area that this whole ordeal takes place in is also called idle synthetic storage, which I guess explains why the android would be there in the first place, but I checked and I couldn't find any of those pods where they're normally stored, so that's a bit muddy. If you have any ideas as to what actually transpired and an answer to this whole mess, feel free to write it down in the comments below. The Autonomy of Ash. The game has 2 DLCs that take place in the Nostromo, and they provide some more insight into the original crew members. One particular log stands out.
This is Ash, Science Officer of the Nostromo. This is an official record in the ship's log of my actions today. A member of the crew was compromised by an unknown creature. I made the decision to allow him back on board without following established quarantine procedure. Looking at the bigger picture, I feel comfortable with this decision. It was a risk I was willing to take, and I will abide by whatever the company decides upon my return.
This is a really interesting log because it makes it seem like Ash is acting autonomously, and that he made that decision himself, and wasn't guided step by step by Weyland-Yutani. Maybe this goal of capturing any alien specimens is so deep inside this programming that he subconsciously knows it's the right call. But in that case, why doesn't the company outright confirm it? It's a pretty interesting bit of lore that's dropped so casually, because I've always assumed that he always knew about Special Order 937, and when he ignored quarantine procedures, he was fully aware of the company's wishes. Pretty peculiar. Oh, and in addition to this whole Nostromo business, I wanted to include the 10th log, specifically since it explains quite succinctly why we find them on Sevastopol in the first place.
This is Dallas. I'm about to broadcast the Nostromo report packet back to the Sol system before we hit the pods. Nearest open relay station looks to be Sevastopol. All things being well, you'll hear from us once we reach the edge of Sol. Don't mess us too much. Dallas out.
The station got the messages and had them saved for some reason, possibly violating some confidentiality agreements along the way, at the request of a certain B. Ransom. Audiobooks on radios. In certain spots throughout Sevastopol, you can find lone radios humming to themselves. Most of the time you'll hear music, but on some rare occasions you'll hear someone talking.
One side of his body lifted itself. He lay at an angle in the doorway. One flank scraped on the white door and was painfully injured, leaving vile brown flecks on it. Soon he was stuck fast, and would not have been able to move at all by himself. The little legs along one side hung quivering in the air, while those on the other side were pressed painfully against the ground. Then his father gave him a hefty shove from behind, which released him where he was held and sent him flying, and heavily bleeding, deep into his room.
That particular section was from Kafka, and that's not the only example. While I was looking for somewhere to hear all the possible recordings, I found the SoundCloud playlist supplied by Matt Filer. And let me tell you, hearing all of this in one go felt like finding an old CD lying on the ground in a creepy alley somewhere, going back home in the middle of the night while it's raining, and playing it while you stare out the window. The songs are good, and the most common instrument I could hear was the guitar and the banjo, which harkens back to the guitars you can find around the station. There's classical music, metal, and pop, along with other genres. Most interesting, however, is the excerpts from Alice in Wonderland, Frankenstein, and the aforementioned Kafka that you can hear. The latter's purpose is even confirmed in an interview. In this part, it reads, "When we did put references in, we still wanted them to be relevant in some way. For example, the Kafka book went in because it was Metamorphosis, and the game is full of transformations, from the alien life cycle to the population changing from civilians to survivors who would take extreme actions they never considered just to stay alive." There are also a couple of just maniacal podcasts, one about Greek gods, mostly mentioned in Jupiter, and another about Christianity. Now, I'm unfortunately not going to be able to analyze all of these in full and how they relate to the larger lore/canon of the story, something I could do in the future if this video gets enough traction, but there is one recording that stands out from the rest of them, titled Social Revolution. It begins with a man giving a speech in which he discusses order, authority, and its significance in relation to civilization. He then calls into question the authority of a certain company.
And if there be reason for anxiety anywhere, it surely should be in the Siegson Corporation, with its unwieldy bulk, its heterogeneous population, and its complex government.
This is, as far as I'm aware, the only time where the game's world is directly referenced in these radio broadcasts, and it could have come from an off-planet location somewhere, where Siegson reigns, or more likely, from the station itself. Perhaps after the decommission and the growing anxiety surrounding Siegson and Sevastopol. It's really interesting, and I loved finding out that stuff like this exists in the game. It makes you appreciate the lived-in world that the writers have created, with its revolutionaries broadcasting for those who might listen, and calling them to question authority and those who hold positions of power, and that they are not the saints they claim to be. To sleep, perchance to dream. If you manage to down one of the androids, there's a chance they will utter this line upon their death.
To sleep, perchance to dream.
Now this is the epitome of horror to me, and I'm thankful I didn't get to experience it myself in the game. It's almost as if the android had a soul all along, and it used its last moments as a chance to say that it was indeed alive. It's also such a large juxtaposition with the cold, calculating nature of the androids. Them saying a Shakespearean line out of nowhere is incredibly chilling. This is actually quite a bit of history, as it's present in one of the posters you find around the station, shown here, and writer Will Porter even planned for the androids to randomly utter Shakespearean lines as vocal exercises. A snippet from an interview reads, "Something of mine I loved, that was recorded and in the game, but was ultimately cut, was the androids quoting snippets of Shakespeare as vocal exercises. We had all these amazing Shakespearean actors, so I followed through with that and snuck various ominous and death-heavy lines into the recording sessions. Androids would say something along the lines of, 'initiating vocal routines,' and then deliver a malevolently neutral couplet or two. Ultimately it was cut, I think because it didn't fit the game world, which is probably fair enough. It certainly would feel like it was slightly out of nowhere. Then again, I'm still totally in love with the concept of a man-made creation plunging into a gas giant on the end of space, still parroting lines written 650 years ago that it could never appreciate or understand. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep." I think his thought process is incredibly beautiful, and without a doubt poetic. It makes me appreciate the work that went into the world building so much, and consequently the entire game. To sleep, perchance to dream. Alien Isolation is, simply put, a masterpiece of a game, and its ability to take the source material it was provided with and execute it with such accuracy and love has to be commended. I went back and watched Alien after playing the game, and the entire movie was just going like this every 5 seconds. It's astounding. One facet of this game and other games that goes particularly unappreciated on average is all the behind the scenes lore that's established. From the archive logs, to the terminal entries, to the graffiti on the wall, to the environmental world building that constantly surrounds you. It all works beautifully to create a world that you can be completely immersed in. Once you launch the game and wear your headphones, you have effectively turned into Amanda, and the alien might as well be there, judging by their actions you're bound to be having. This is what I find beautiful about horror games. It engages this primal, instinctive fear that's present in everyone, and manages to evoke it in a safe manner. It's like being hunted by a lion in prehistoric times, except there is no danger of being ripped apart. But anyways, back to the world building. Alien Isolation, along with Alien, provides a commentary on the soulless corporations that we have today. A massive grey people that is never seen nor named, giving out orders from their ivory towers, not really seeming malevolent by any means, because they're just completely detached from anything human. It's present in Seegson, and of course, it's present in Weyland-Yutani. This is something that I understood instinctively from the company's descriptions, and didn't find the need to put it into words, until now. It's incredible writing that works on multiple levels. This video is a love letter to the game, and I hope I've been able to do it justice. Thank you so much to anyone who's watched this far. If you have, I'd like to do a little litmus test. Comment to sleep, perchance to dream. I'd also like to thank you/randomcrits1, who was the only one who had an Iceberg chart on Alien Isolation, which I used as a base, as well as the Alien Isolation subreddit itself and its members who answered my dumb questions, members of the Alien Isolation speedrun Discord server, and CatVR, who helped me greatly with footage and research. His YouTube channel is linked below. Watch out for an Alien Isolation video coming sometime in October. Oh, and of course, the Xenopedia wiki. It has been a gold mine for getting all the information necessary for the Iceberg. That's about it for me. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I'm Sad the Glad, last survivor of a 2.5-hour iceberg. Signing off.